We have to keep it under such tight security because of the order of the hand and nest. They're always trying to sneak in here. Just ask our air conditioning repairman. He knows.
It's appalling.
Exactly. Wait, you're not our air conditioning repairman. That's our air conditioning repairman.
Ha-ha!
Damn it! That's what I was talking about! It's why I formed a group of volunteer egg protectors. It's our goal to thwart the order of... Wait a minute, we don't even have air conditioning!
Ha-ha!
Why are these people so into eggs? I mean, they're just eggs.
Everyone should be into eggs. Nature's most elegant structure. In here, all life begins and all life ends. I believe we go back into an egg when we die. But where I choose to protect the eggs, the Order desires only to collect them. They have the egg madness.
Egg madness.
The overwhelming desire to possess an egg. It's latent in all of us. The more we're around eggs, the more we're likely to snap. I keep it under control.
Alright, so it's November 22nd, Thanksgiving, at least in the United States. And I'm going to read The Work of the Egg, which I published or posted, whatever you want to call it, Sunday, January 18th, 2015. And I wrote, "The point of this blog has been to explore various strands of information and concepts I have found interesting and significant, and to present such subjects in as creative yet still concise of a way, so as to help others who may be interested in this material extend their own knowledge. The primary subject of this blog, however, has so far been centralized around the mystery of the obsidian egg, a talismanic stone egg which I happened to, unknowingly at the time, obtain for myself on a day which I later found to be highly significant." Obviously, which I've mentioned this whole thing numerous times, and the reason I keep mentioning it in this blog was basically because the more I looked at it and the more I saw all this stuff kind of like, I can't help but see it as like this sort of beacon, or that's why I call it talismanic, because basically it's like it represented something. Even at the time when I got it, I thought, there's something to this. It was interesting. It was at this gemstone store or shop sort of thing at this like Renaissance fair in Mesa, Arizona, and it was $19, and I thought it looked interesting, so I bought it. And then, like, within a few days, I got outside the circles of time. And obviously, there's that chapter, Ma Ion, and it goes into April 2nd and 107. And so from there, again, I saw just all these things slowly unravel. And the symbolism of the spiral, also Phi and all that, and its relation to the egg. And all this geometry. Like, again, I didn't know that this stuff existed. So for me to kind of have this sort of synchronicity, I guess you could call it, obviously. And that's what caused me I felt like the need to make a sort of record. And that's why I created the blog in the first place. Like I needed some sort of proof in a way, and yet none of this stuff that I subsequently found did I know at the time. So in a way it came as like a sort of proof for not just me, but in a way some of this stuff. And anyway, I better keep reading. I said, it was April 2nd, 2011, and I happened to just buy an obsidian egg at a gemstone store at the Renaissance Festival, which days later, once I began reading Outside the Circles of Time by Kenneth Grant, and I found out that not only was the egg a hugely symbolic centerpiece of his other books, but so was the date itself, which was that of the birthday of Charles Stansfeld Jones, otherwise known as the magical son and student of Aleister Crowley, Frater Achad. Not only this, but in the 9th chapter of the aforementioned book, titled Ma Ion, which it discusses how Frater Achad also discovered on his 62nd birthday of April 2nd, 1948, a major key of Liber El Veliges, Crowley's Book of the Law, which he claimed inaugurated the Aeon of Horus in 1904. Achad had also discovered previously the key of Liber El as if it were he himself, for Achad means one or unity, by basically adding A, which is one, to Liber El, or what was originally obviously Liber El. And before he came along and showed Crowley his findings, which at first consisted of simply adding A1 or A to the title of the Book of the Law, which had, see, I can't believe I left all these typos, which until then he had actually titled Liber El Veliges. This key unlocked many of the mysteries of the book, for not only Crowley, but all who were to look into the book from then on, for Achad had been realized as the one to follow thee, from Liber El chapter 2 verse 76, and the child of thy bowels, El chapter 1 verse 55. And even though Crowley ended up later criticizing much of Achad's later work, and books in particular, looking now through the lens which Kenneth Grant has provided us in his own work, we can see that there is much that has been left incubating in this magical egg, which has long been seemingly hidden under the veil of a great storm of distraction. As Grant mentions in Chapter 8 of Outside the Circles of Time, titled Initiations of Eosic, the first appearance of this magic egg began in 1904 in the text of the Book of the Law, in verse 49 of Chapter 1, where it is said, "This is of the four, there is a fifth who is invisible, and therein am I as a babe in an egg." This fifth who is invisible is an obvious reference to the fifth element of Akasha or spirit, which is symbolized by a black egg. To convey the full import of this egg and its recurrence at important intervals, I will quote Grant from the section where he discusses this. Since the receipt of AL in 1904, when the egg is first mentioned, chapter 2, verse 49, to the Abeldees working in 1911, a period of 7 years elapsed. The egg appears again 7 years later in 1918 via Amalantra, see Liber 729, and again in 1925, another 7 years later, during one of Frater Achad's initiations. A year after which, i.e. in 1926, he claimed to have received the word of the Aeon, which Crowley had failed to do, which he said was Eulalia, or 103. This word is connected with Ma-Ion and the Mani-O, the number of which, 107, is that of Bitsa, an egg. The word oval, which appears in the cryptic verse 76 of AL chapter 2, also equals 107. In the year 1932, after yet another lapse of 7 years, Achad passed the silver ordeal mentioned in Liber El chapter 3 verse 64, and was born anew from the egg of spirit. There is no need for comment upon the events of 1939. They are universally remembered, but it happens to be the year in which another great old one, Eosic, revealed his sigil to Kenneth Grant. A further 7 years brings us to 1946, the year of the initiation of Frater Eosic, for such Kenneth Grant had now become, into the inner mysteries of the Draconian current. Crowley was to die a year later, and this made way eventually for Eosic to supersede Baphomet as the outer head of the OTO. These 7 periods of 7 years make a cycle of 49, which is the mystical number of Venus, i.e. Babylon, 7 times 7. In Liber D, 49 is mentioned as a number useful in the calculations of D, i.e. John D, or the original 007, who, it will be remembered, specialized in traffic with alien entities. One such, Abeldees, who trafficked with Crowley in 1911, terminated an astral seance with the word 7 repeated 4 times. The fourth 7 in the above series indicates the year 1925, which led up to the discovery by Frater Achad of the word of the Aeon. When the subject of the egg is raised in 1918 via Amalantra, that entity says, "Going into the mother to be born again, you get a new life, and then the earth is covered with wonderful flowers. And bees come to the flowers to get honey to store, and the honey is stored elixir." Note the last 5 words which form an important strand in the mystery of the Kalas. Amalantra insisted that the egg is a work which must be done, the great work, and by doing this work we get to the key. Crowley was instructed to go to Egypt in search of the egg. There he was to create an altar. A king was also mentioned. When Crowley inquired about the king's identity, he was told that the king was OIV, VIO, or Omnia in Uno, Unus in Omnibus, all in one in all, one of the mottos of Frater Achad, which he later found equals 777. See the Diary of Frater Achad, or Liber 31. This may explain the connection between the child seen in the vision and Amalantra's assurance that it's all in the egg. In the second chapter of A.L., or the Book of the Law, verse 49, appear these words, "This is of the four, there is a fifth who is invisible, and therein am I as a babe in an egg." When Amalantra is questioned further concerning the egg, and how the knowledge which it represents may be realized by breaking open the egg, he replies, "Thou art to go this way." The use of the word way here is obscure, but may it not be possible that it refers to Lamb, the entity having the egg-shaped cranium, who is associated with the way? Crowley drew a portrait of Lamb and entitled it The Way, which is a translation of the word lamb, being a root of lama. The drawing was executed at about the same time as the sittings with Amalantra in 1918. Is it perhaps also possible that Lamb is a form of Amalantra, where the lamb appears in reverse in the name of the wizard? Basically an avatar or a shell or a specter or some sort of manifestation. I could see it being that in a way, but Amalantra, it's weird because Crowley has this connection with Lamb. In a way, they say it's like, some people have said it's like Crowley's idealized self-portrait, whereas Amalantra, being 729, literally corresponds with Charles Stansfeld Jones, which also equals 729, and then 729 being Kephas, the stone. In a way, it's kind of like a union between the two, but I don't know, it's just very weird. In a way, it's like, because Crowley identified with 666, which is, again, LM, or Lamed Mem final, plus the way, 36, it's 666, and I don't know, it's just like, in a way, he being so identified, and again, identity is 107, and it's almost like he invoked it. And so 666 plus 333, the number of Qurans on, is again 999, which, anyway, Kenneth Grant describes the egg extensively throughout his later books, and in Outer Gateways he specifically associates it with Lamb because Lamb and his egg appear in the appended text contained in the book called The Wisdom of Silba. Silba is a received word, with the two values being either 93 with the Samet or 333 with the Shin, and according to Grant it refers to the self, source of wisdom of the stellar tradition. In Beyond the Mauve Zone, he also notes that this word appears in another channeled or received language known as Algolian, and in connection with the egg means nest. Grant also notes on page 237 of Beyond the Mauve Zone that according to Frater Achad, the 13-lettered word manifestation conceals the name of Ma'ayan, and its enumeration of 257 is equivalent to both egg and nest. Nest being Kaf Nun, 150, and Bitsa, egg, 107. 17 is the path of Zain and is the reflex of Lamb plus the 0 or the egg. The egg in the nest is the Mani-O, the jewel in the lotus which typify the ends of manifestation. This is the interplay of Nuit and Hadit which give rise to the egg of the universe, and the solar phallic Horus or Heru Raha, who is dual-natured and comprised of the active Rahur Kuit and the passive Hur Parkrat, or basically Horus and Set, or Ra and Set. And again, Ra plus Set is 666. The outer and inner aspects of the egg. The Russian mystic Helena Blavatsky, co-creator of the Theosophical Society, which influenced many people in magical orders, including Crowley and Grant, has a large section on the egg in her magnum opus, The Secret Doctrine, and it is provided here at length for the sake of convenience, as it is very enlightening and covers many areas. Whence this universal symbol. The egg was incorporated as a sacred sign in the cosmogony of every people on the earth, and was revered both on account of its form and its inner mystery. From the earliest mental conceptions of man, it was known as that which represented most successfully the origin and secret of being, the gradual development of the imperceptible germ within the closed shell, the inward working, without any apparent outward interference of force, which from a latent nothing produced an active something, needed not save heat, and which, having gradually evolved into a concrete living creature, broke its shell, appearing to the outward sense of all a self-generated and self-created being, must have been a standing miracle from the beginning. The secret teaching explains the reason for this reverence by the symbolism of the prehistoric races. The first cause had no name in the beginnings. Later it was pictured in the fancy of the thinkers as an ever-invisible, mysterious bird that dropped an egg into chaos, which egg becomes the universe. Hence Brahm was called Kalahansa, the swan in space and time. He became the swan of eternity who lays at the beginning of each Maha Manvantara, or cycle of time, a golden egg. It typifies the great circle, or zero, or O, itself a symbol for the universe and its spherical bodies. The second reason for its having been chosen as the symbolical representation of the universe and of our earth was its form. It was a circle and a sphere, and the oviform shape of our globe must have been known from the beginning of symbology, since it was so universally adopted. The first manifestation of the cosmos in the form of an egg was the most widely diffused belief of antiquity. As Bryant shows, it was a symbol adopted among the Greeks, the Syrians, Persians, and Egyptians. In chapter 34 of the Egyptian ritual, Seb, the god of time and of the earth, is spoken of as having laid an egg, or the universe, an egg conceived at the hour of the Great One of the dual force. Ra is shown like Brahma gestating in the egg of the universe. The deceased is resplendent in the egg of the land of mysteries. For this is the egg to which is given life among the gods. It is the egg of the great clucking hen, the egg of Seb, who issues from it like a hawk. With the Greeks, the Orphic egg is described by Aristophanes and was part of the Dionysiac and other mysteries, during which the mundane egg was consecrated and its significance explained. Porphyry showing it a representation of the world, Meneni de to oon cosmon. Faber and Bryant have tried to show that the egg typified the Ark of Noah, which, unless the latter is accepted as purely allegorical and symbolical, is a wild belief. It can have typified the ark only as a synonym of the moon, the Argo which carries the universal seed of life, but had surely nothing to do with the ark of the Bible. Anyhow, the belief that the universe existed in the beginning in the shape of an egg was general, and as Wilson has it, a similar account of the first aggregation of the elements in the form of an egg is given in all the Indian Puranas, with the usual epithet Haima or Hiranya, golden, as it occurs in Manu. Hiranya, however, means resplendent, shining, rather than golden, as proved by the great Indian scholar, the late Swami Dayanand Sarasvati, in his unpublished polemics with Professor Max Muller. As said in the Vishnu Purana, intellect, or Mahat, like Mahatma, the unmanifested gross elements inclusive, formed an egg, and the Lord of the universe himself abided in it, in the character of Brahma. In that egg, O Brahman, were the continents and seas and mountains, the planets and the divisions of the universe, the gods, the demons, and mankind. Book 1, Chapter 2. Both in Greece and in India, the first visible male being who united in himself the nature of either sex abode in the egg and issued from it. This firstborn of the world was Dionysus, with some Greeks, the god who sprang from the mundane egg, and from whom the mortals and immortals were derived. The god Ra is shown in the ritual beaming in his egg, the sun, and he starts off as soon as the god Shu, the solar energy, awakens and gives him the impulse. He is in the solar egg, the egg to which is given life among the gods. See, I'm not good with Roman numerals, but that's probably 42, I guess? I don't know. The solar god exclaims, I am the creative soul of the celestial abyss. None sees my nest, none can break my egg, I am the Lord. In view of this circular form, the line issuing from the O, or the egg, or the male from the female in the androgen, it is strange to find a scholar saying on the ground that the most ancient Indian manuscripts show no trace of it, that the ancient Aryans were ignorant of the decimal notation. The 10, being the sacred number of the universe, was secret and esoteric both as the unit and cipher, or 0, the circle. Moreover, Professor Max Muller says that the two words cipher and 0, which are but one, and Sephir, it's also Sephir, which is like sphere again, and Sephiroth, which are but one, are sufficient to prove that our figures are borrowed from the Arabs. And again, our numerals are called Arabic numerals, so cipher is the Arabic sifron and means empty, a translation of the Sanskrit name of naught, sunya, he says. The Arabs had their figures from Hindustan, and never claimed the discovery for themselves. As to the Pythagoreans, we need but turn to the ancient manuscripts of Boethius's geometry, composed in the 6th century, to find among the Pythagorean numerals the 1 and the naught as the first and final ciphers. And Porphyry, who quotes from Pythagorean Moderatus, says that the numerals of Pythagoras were hieroglyphical symbols by means whereof he explained ideas concerning the nature of things, or the origin of the universe. Now if, on the other hand, the most ancient Indian manuscripts show as yet no trace of decimal notation in them, and Max Muller states very clearly that until now he has found but 9 letters, the initials of the Sanskrit numerals, in them. On the other hand, we have records as ancient to supply the wanted proof. We speak of the sculptures and sacred imagery in the most ancient temples of the Far East. Pythagoras derived his knowledge from India, and we find Professor Max Muller corroborating his statement, at least so far as to allow the Neo-Pythagoreans to have been the first teachers of ciphering among the Greeks and Romans, that they at Alexandria or in Syria became acquainted with the Indian figures and adopted them to the Pythagorean abacus, or figures. This cautious admission implies that Pythagoras himself was acquainted with but 9 figures. Thus we might reasonably answer that, although we possess no certain proof exoterically that the decimal notation was known by Pythagoras, who lived on the very close of the archaic ages, we have yet sufficient evidence to show that the full numbers, as given by Boethius, were known to the Pythagoreans, even before Alexandria was built. This evidence we find in Aristotle, who says that some philosophers hold that ideas and numbers are of the same nature and amount to 10 in all. This, we believe, will be sufficient to show that the decimal notation was known among them at least as early as 4 centuries BC, for Aristotle does not seem to treat the question as an innovation of the Neo-Pythagoreans. A Kabbalist would be rather inclined to believe that as the Arabic Sifron was taken from the Indian Sinya or Sunya, not, so the Jewish Kabbalistic Sephiroth, Sephrim, were taken from the word cipher, not in the sense of emptiness, but the reverse, that of creation by number and degrees in their evolution. And the Sephiroth, or 10, or this symbol, which is like the power symbol, See Max Muller's Our Figures, see King's Gnostics and Their Remains, etc. But we know more than that. We know that the decimal system must have been known to the mankind of the earliest archaic ages, since the whole astronomical and geometrical portion of the secret sacerdotal language was built upon the number 10, or the combination of the male and female principles. And since the pyramid of Cheops is built upon the measures of this decimal notation, or rather upon the digits and their combinations with the naught, of this, however, sufficient was said in Isis Unveiled, and it is useless to repeat and return to the same subject. The symbolism of the lunar and solar deities is so inextricably mixed up that it is next to impossible to separate such glyphs as the egg, the lotus, and the sacred animals from each other. The ibis, for example, sacred to Isis, who is often represented with the head of that bird, sacred also to Mercury or Thoth, because that god assumed its form while escaping from Typhon. The ibis was held in the greatest veneration in Egypt. There were two kinds of ibises, Herodotus tells us, Liber 2, chapter 75, in that country, one quite black, the other black and white. The former is credited with fighting and exterminating the winged serpents which came every spring from Arabia and infested the country. The other was sacred to the moon because the latter planet is white and brilliant on her external side, dark and black on that side which never turns to the earth. Moreover, the ibis kills land serpents and makes the most terrible havoc among the eggs of the crocodile, and thus saves Egypt from having the Nile infested by those horrible saurians. The bird is credited with doing so in the moonlight and thus being helped by Isis, as the moon her sidereal symbol. But the nearer esoteric truth underlying these popular myths is that Hermes, as shown by Abenethius, or in De Cultu Egypt, watched under the form of that bird over the Egyptians, and taught them the occult arts and sciences. This means simply that the ibis religiosa had and has magical properties in common with many other birds, the albatross preeminently, and the mythical white swan, the swan of eternity or time, the Kala Hansa. Were it otherwise indeed, why should all the ancient peoples, who were no more fools than we are, have had such a superstitious dread of killing certain birds? In Egypt, he who killed an ibis, or the golden hawk, the symbol of the sun and Osiris, risked and could hardly escape death. The veneration of some nations for birds was such that Zoroaster, in his precepts, forbids their slaughter as a heinous crime. We laugh in our age at every kind of divination, yet why should so many generations have believed in divination by birds, or even in zoomancy said by Suidas to have been imparted by Orpheus, who taught how to perceive in the yolk and white of the egg under certain conditions that which the bird born from it would have seen around it during its short life. This occult art, which demanded 3,000 years ago the greatest learning and most abstruse mathematical calculations, has now fallen into the depths of degradation. It is old kooks and fortune-tellers who read their future to servant girls in search of husbands by means of the white of an egg in a glass. Nevertheless, even Christians have to this day their sacred birds, for instance, the dove, the symbol of the Holy Ghost, nor have they neglected the sacred animals. The evangelical zoolatry, the bull, the eagle, the lion, and the angel, in reality the cherub or seraph, the fiery winged serpent, is as much pagan as that of the Egyptians or the Chaldeans. These four animals are, in reality, the symbols of the four elements, and of the four lower principles in man. Nevertheless, they correspond physically and materially to the four constellations that form, so to speak, the suite or cortege of the solar god, and occupy, during the winter solstice, the four cardinal points of the zodiacal circle. These four animals may be seen in many of the Roman Catholic New Testaments, where the portraits of the evangelists are given. They are the animals of Ezekiel's Merkabah. As truly stated by Rigon, the ancient hierophants have combined so cleverly the dogmas and symbols of their religious philosophies that these symbols can be fully explained only by the combination and knowledge of all the keys. And there you go. They can be only approximately interpreted. Even if one finds out 3 out of these 7 systems, the anthropological, the psychic, and the astronomical, the 2 chief interpretations, the highest and the lowest, the spiritual and the physiological, they preserved in the greatest secrecy until the latter fell into the dominion of the profane. Thus far, with regard only to prehistoric hierophants, with whom that which has now become purely or impurely phallic was a science as profound and as mysterious as biology and physiology are now. This was their exclusive property, the fruit of their studies and discoveries. The other 2 were those which dealt with the creative gods, or theogony, and with creative man, i.e. the ideal and the practical mysteries. These interpretations were so cleverly veiled and combined that many were those who, while arriving at the discovery of one meaning, were baffled in understanding the significance of the others, and could never unriddle them sufficiently to commit dangerous indiscretions. The highest, the first, and the fourth, theogony in relation to anthropogony, were almost impossible to fathom. We find the proofs of this in the Jewish Holy Writ. It is owing to the serpent being oviparous that it became, egg-bearing, that it became a symbol of wisdom and an emblem of the logoi, or the self-born. In the temple of Philo in Upper Egypt, an egg was artificially prepared of clay made of various incenses, and it was made to hatch by a peculiar process when a cerastus, the horned viper, was born. The same was done in antiquity for the cobra in the Indian temples. The creative god emerges from the egg that issues from the mouth of Neph as a winged serpent, because the serpent is the symbol of the all-wisdom. With the Hebrews he is lived by the flying or fiery serpents of the wilderness and Moses, and with the Alexandrian mystics he becomes the Ophiokristos, the Logos of the Gnostics. The Protestants try to show that the allegory of the brazen serpent and of the fiery serpents has a direct reference to the mystery of Christ and crucifixion, but it has a far nearer relation in truth to the mystery of generation, when dissociated from the egg with the central germ, or the circle with its central point. The brazen serpent had no such holy meaning as that, nor was it in fact glorified above the fiery serpents, for the bite of which it was only a natural remedy. The symbological meaning of the word brazen being the feminine principle, and that of fiery or gold the male one. In the Book of the Dead, as just shown, reference is often made to the egg. Ra, the mighty one, remains in his egg during the struggle between the children of the rebellion and Shu, the solar energy and the dragon of darkness. The deceased is resplendent in his egg when he crosses to the land of mystery. He is the egg of Seb. Let's go back and read some of this. And this is only because the brazen serpent was lifted on a pole. It had rather a reference to Miko, the Egyptian egg, standing upright supported by the sacred Tau, since the egg and the serpent are inseparable in the old worship and symbology of Egypt, and since the brazen and fiery serpents were seraphs, the burning fiery messengers or serpents of God, the Nagas of India. It was a purely phallic symbol without the egg, while when associated with it, it related to cosmic creation. Brass was a metal symbolizing the netherworld, that of the womb where life should begin. The word for serpent was in Hebrew nakash, but this is the same term for brass. It is said in Numbers that the Jews complained of the wilderness where there was no water, after which the Lord sent fiery serpents to bite them, when, to oblige Moses, he gives them as a remedy the brazen serpent on a pole to look at, after which any man, when he beheld the serpent of brass, lived. After that the Lord gathered the people together at the well of Beer, gives them water, and grateful Israel sang this song, Spring up, O well. When after studying symbology the Christian reader comes to understand the innermost meaning of these 3 symbols, water, brazen, the serpent, and a few more, In the sense given to them in the Holy Bible, he will hardly like to connect the sacred name of his Savior with the brazen serpent incident. The seraphim, or fiery-winged serpents, are no doubt connected with and inseparable from the idea of the serpent of eternity, God, as explained in Keneally's Apocalypse. But the word cherub also meant serpent, in one sense, though its direct meaning is different, because the cherubim and the Persian-winged grufies, or griffins, the guardians of the Golden Mountain, are the same, and their compound name shows their character, as it is formed with Ker, or circle, and Ob, the serpent, therefore a serpent in a circle. And this settles the phallic character of the brazen serpent and justifies Hezekiah for breaking it. See 2 Kings chapter 18, verse 4. Verbum sat sapienti. The egg was the symbol of life and immortality and eternity, as also the glyph of the generative matrix and the tau associated with it, only of life and birth in generation. The mundane egg was placed in Khnum, the water of space, or the feminine abstract principle, Khnum becoming, with the fall of mankind into generation and phallicism, Amon, the creative god. And when Ptah, the fiery god, carries the mundane egg in his hand, then the symbolism becomes quite terrestrial and concrete in its significance. In connection with the hawk, the symbol of Osiris' sun, the symbol is dual. It relates to both lives, the mortal and the immortal. In Kircher's Oedipus Egypticus, Volume 3, page 124, one can see on the papyrus engraved in it an egg floating above the mummy. This is the symbol of hope and the promise of a second birth for the Osirified dead. His soul, after due purification in the Amenti, will gestate in this egg of immortality to be reborn from it into a new life on earth. That just all goes back to, again, Amalantra, the egg, in Egypt. For this egg in the esoteric doctrine is the Devachan, the abode of bliss. And remember that Ananda is bliss and is 107. The winged scarabaeus, or scarabaeus, being alike a symbol of it. The winged globe is but another form of the egg, and has the same significance as the scarabaeus, the kopiru, from the root kopru, to become, to be reborn, obviously relating to Kephra, which relates to the rebirth of man as well as to his spiritual regeneration. In the Theogony of Mochus, or Mochus, we find ether first, and then the air, from which Ulam, the intelligible noetus deity, the visible universe of matter, is born out of the mundane egg. Movers Phoenizer, page 282. In the Orphic hymns, the Eros Phanes evolves from the divine egg, which the ethereal winds impregnate, wind being the spirit of the unknown darkness, the Spirit of God, as explains K.O. Muller 236. The divine idea, says Plato, who is said to move ether. In the Hindu Kataka Upanishad, Purusha, the divine spirit, already stands before the original matter, from whose union springs the great soul of the world. Maha Atma, Brahma, the spirit of life, etc., etc. Besides this, there are many charming allegories on this subject scattered through the sacred books of the Brahmins. In one place it is the female creator who is first a germ, then a drop of heavenly dew, a pearl, and then an egg. In such cases, of which there are too many to enumerate them separately, the egg gives birth to the 4 elements within the 5th, ether, and is covered within 7 coverings, which become later on the 7 upper and 7 lower worlds. Breaking in two, the shell becomes the heaven, and the meat in the egg the earth, the white forming the terrestrial waters. The latter appellations are all identical with anima mundi, or the universal soul, the astral light of the Kabbalist and occultist, or the egg of darkness. Then again, it is Vishnu who emerges from within the egg with a lotus in his hand. Vinata, a daughter of Daksha and the wife of Kasyapa, the self-born sprung from time, one of the 7 creators of our world, brought forth an egg from which was born Garuda, the vehicle of Vishnu, basically the phoenix. the latter allegory having a relation to our Earth only, as Garuda is the great cycle. The egg was sacred to Isis. The priests of Egypt never ate eggs on that account. Diodorus Siculus states that Osiris was born from an egg, like Brahma. From Leda's egg, Apollo and Latona were born, as also Castor and Pollux, the bright Gemini. And though the Buddhists do not attribute the same origin to their founder, yet no more than the ancient Egyptians or the modern Brahmins do they eat eggs, lest they should destroy the germ of life latent in them, and commit thereby sin. The Chinese believe that their first man was born from an egg, which Tian, a god, dropped down from heaven to earth into the waters. The symbol is still regarded by some as representing the idea of the origin of life, which is a scientific truth, though the human ovum is invisible to the naked eye. Therefore we see respect shown to it from the remotest past by the Greeks, Phoenicians, Romans, the Japanese, and the Siamese, to the North and the South American tribes, and even the savages of the remotest islands. While the Egyptians, the concealed god was Ammon, Mon, all their gods were dual, the scientific reality for the sanctuary, its double, the fabulous and mythical entity for the masses. For instance, as observed in Chaos, Theos, Cosmos, the older Horus was the idea of the world remaining in the demiurgic mind, born in darkness before the creation of the world. The second Horus was the same idea going forth from the Logos, becoming clothed with matter and assuming an actual existence. Compare Movers Phoenizer, page 268. The same with Khnum and Iman. Both are represented ram-headed and both often confused, though their functions are different. Khnum is the modeler of men, fashioning men and things out of the mundane egg on a potter's wheel. Ammon-Ra, the generator, is the secondary aspect of the concealed deity. Khnum was adored at Elephanta and Philo, Ammon at Thebes. But it is Emeft, the one, supreme planetary principle, who blows the egg out of his mouth and who is, therefore, Brahma. The shadow of the deity, cosmic and universal, of that which broods over and permeates the egg with its vivifying spirit until the germ contained in it is ripe, was the mystery god whose name was unpronounceable. It is Ptah, however, he who opens, the opener of life and death, who proceeds from the egg of the world to begin his dual work. See the Book of Numbers. Let's go back up here. Isis is almost always represented holding a lotus in one hand and in the other a circle and the cross, or crux ansata, the ankh, the egg being sacred to her. The Chinese seem to have thus anticipated Sir William Thomson's theory that the first living germ had dropped to the earth from some passing comet. Query, why should this be called scientific and the Chinese idea a superstitious, foolish theory? Horus, the older, or Hanori, is an ancient aspect of the solar god contemporary with Ra and Shu. Harori is often mistaken for Hor, or Horsusi, son of Osiris and Isis. The Egyptians very often represented the rising sun under the form of Hor, the older, rising from a full-blown lotus, the universe, when the solar disk is always found on the hawk head of that god. Harori is Khnum. Ammon, or Mon, the hidden, the supreme spirit. The shadow of the deity, cosmic and universal, of that which broods over and permeates the egg with its vivifying spirit until the germ contained in it is ripe, was the mystery god whose name was unpronounceable. It is Ptah, however, he who opens, the opener of life and death. According to the Greeks, the phantom form of the chemis, or chemi, ancient Egyptian, which floats on the ethereal waves of the Empyrean sphere, was called into being by Horus Apollo, the sun god, who caused it to evolve out of the mundane egg. In the Scandinavian cosmogony placed by Professor Mats Muller in point of time as far anterior to the Vedas in the poem of Voluspa, the song of the prophetess, the mundane egg is again discovered in the phantom germ of the universe, which is represented as lying in the Janunga gap The cup of illusion, Maya, the boundless and void abyss. In this world's matrix, formerly a region of night and desolation, Nibelheim, the mist place, the nebular as it is called now, and the astral light, dropped a ray of cold light which overflowed this cup and froze in it. Then the invisible blew a scorching wind which dissolved the frozen waters and cleared the mist. These waters, or chaos, called the streams of Elivagar, distilling and vivifying drops, fell down and created the earth and the giant Ymir, who only had the semblance of man, the heavenly man, and the cow, Audhumla, the mother or astral light or cosmic soul, from whose udder flowed 4 streams of milk, the 4 cardinal points, the 4 heads of the 4 rivers of Eden, etc., and which 4 allegorically are symbolized by the cube and all its various and mystical meanings. The Christians, especially the Greek and Latin churches, have fully adopted the symbol and see in it a commemoration of life eternal, of salvation, and of resurrection. This is found in and corroborated by the time-honored custom of exchanging Easter eggs. And I was going to say, back when they were talking about the bird, it made me think of the whole stork myth, or not myth, but fairy tale or whatever. From the Anguinum, the egg of the pagan druid, whose name alone made Rome tremble with fear, to the red Easter egg of the Slavonian peasant, a cycle is past. Also, where the Virgin Mary carries a red egg in some depictions. And yet, whether in civilized Europe or among the abject savages of Central America, we find the same archaic primitive thought. If we only search for it and do not disfigure in the haughtiness of our fancied mental and physical superiority the original idea of the symbol. His trident goddesses are Sati and Anuki. Ptah was originally the god of death, of destruction, like Shiva. He is a solar god only by virtue of the sun's fire, killing as well as vivifying. He was the national god of Memphis, the radiant and fair-faced god. The Saqqara bronzes Saitic epoch. And I can't help but just want to say, again, destruction, 666, the negative aspect of 666, and then radiant is also 666, the creative aspect. So it's got that demiurgic quality. But I'm going to stop this and go make a coffee and then read the rest, because that was pretty long. Alright, so Blavatsky makes it pretty clear that the egg is symbolic of the all-encompassing spirit of life itself, which is omnipresent throughout the universe from every level between microcosm and macrocosm, from the beginning to the end of manifestation. The egg is also both the alchemical vessel, or athanor, which carries the great work, as well as its final completion as the philosopher's stone of pure gold. As we've found, gold itself has the same value as that of the egg, bitsa, being Gimel 3, Ayin 70, Lamed 30, and Daleth 4. Bitsa being Beth 2, Yod 10, Zadi 90, and Hay 5, as well as oval, Ayin 70, Vav 6, Aleph 1, Lamed 30, which is a clue as to the nature of the key to the cryptogram in verse 76 of chapter 2 of Liber AL. And again, AL 31 plus 76, 107. The key, particularly the gold key, is an iconic focal point of the later Amalantra working of 1918, to which Grant was referring to above. Amalantra was an astral wizard who was channeled by Crowley, Achad, and Ahitha, or Roddy Minor, for a stint, which was, as Grant noted, the same time which Crowley happened to either receive contact or have a vision of the entity depicted in the portrait of Lamb. And I later have mentioned the portrait of Lamb spelled out or calculated is also 1918. In Liber 729, amongst the multitude of descriptive visions, the first actual words to be recorded as having appeared or received was the name Ham, or Ham, in an oblong egg, and then Amalantra's first word to be uttered is child. Here's a quote for context. Monday, January 14th, 1918, 12:10 a.m. While with the lady of our dreams, I had a vision of myself being a spreading candlestick with 13 candles. Over each flame was the opening of a tube which could hold water as a fountain. These tubes met the flame in a throbbing vibration which became almost excruciating when suddenly the part of the candlestick above the stem or staff broke off and became a crown. The crown floated in the air tilted at a slight angle, and a circle which was a halo came down from heaven and dropped into the crown. In the center a wand came, and then it all hovered above the candlestick with a veil round it. The veil in some ways appeared as rays of light. After I told this vision, Therion talked a long while about the number 93, how adepts were tested when they brought messages, and how messages had been sent to him through the Scarlet Woman. I had another vision of myself being 13 naked women lying in a row and all being caressed at one time. When I told this to Therion, in a somewhat indirect manner, he suggested that I see if I could get any messages through visions or otherwise. I began by asking for a vision containing a message. I first heard gurgling water and saw a dark farmhouse in among trees and green fields. The house and other things disappeared, and a dark yoni appeared just where the house had stood. I then asked, where will a message come from? Immediately soldiers with guns appeared lounging about the place, and a king on a throne where the house had stood. I then asked for a message and saw an egg, in which were many tiny convolutions of some flesh-like substance which would form something. The egg was placed in an oblong as in a picture. Around it were clouds, trees, mountains, and water, called the 4 elements. A camel appeared in front of the whole picture. I next tried to find out who the king was. He looked more like Professor Shotwell than anyone else. That is, he was simple, democratic, and very learned and fine. He was certainly not a king belonging to any kingdom limited by a country's borders, but was a king of men, or a king of the world. I asked his name, and the word Ham appeared between the egg and the oblong and the soldiers around the king, i.e., king of Egypt. The king went out to one side, and a wizard linked his arm in the king's as they disappeared. The wizard looked at me significantly as they left. It was a sort of look as if one would almost wink. He was an old man with gray beard, dressed in a long black gown. He was infinitely wise. They seemed to go to a cave in the base of a low mountain on the shore of a large body of water. A spring of sparkling cool water bubbled up through a barrel near the mouth of the cave. I went into the cave and saw them doing something mysterious with a revolver. The wizard had the revolver. What they were going to do was a joke of some kind, but the wizard looked grim about it. At Therion's suggestion, I went up to them and said, "I am Eve." This seemed to stop everything. They both disappeared with the cave. Very soon I saw the king sitting in a niche covered with a canopy, cut in the side of the mountain. In quite another place, the wizard was sitting under a tree fanning himself. At Therion's suggestion, I went up to him and asked him his name. I became very frightened and had the same sensation as when I spoke to him in the cave. It was a kind of shyness and awe. He only smiled at me and would not speak. It seemed that I did not know enough for him to speak with me. In order for him to say anything to me, I should have to build a fire of sticks, which he showed me how to do. There was a baby in some way connected with the act of my building the fire, which was like a ritual. Then a most beautiful lion was standing by the fire. The wizard was standing and still, held 1 or 2 sticks in his hands. He smiled and said, "Child." I then saw a most beautiful naked boy 5 or 6 years old dancing and playing in the woods in front of us. Therion asked how he would look dressed, and when I saw him in conventional clothes, he looked very uncomfortable and repressed. He looked as if he should be dressed in skins such as tigers. To one side near the place where I made the fire was a large turtle standing up as a penguin stands. The wizard was very happy and satisfied looking. He sat down and reached out his hand to me and had me sit down beside him. As he watched the boy, he put his left arm around me tenderly and placed my head on the left side of his chest near my shoulder. He said, "It's all in the egg." The end. That was the first channeling. This was the beginning of the Amalantra working, at least as it is recorded. Crowley did not record anything about Lamb, but Grant offers many ideas as to just what this mystery of the egg, Lamb, and Amalantra may portend. First of all, the fact that he was simply put as the frontispiece to Crowley's edition, or commentary of the Voice of the Silence itself, says something. The note about Lamb's name essentially meaning the way, as in Tibetan Lama, shows that this silence is about the depth of the egg, or menstruum of either mind, spirit, space, etc., all of which resolve themselves into the silence of the void, which Grant associates specifically with Silba. As the nest, the void is where the egg rests as if it were a lotus of Ulam, 107, consciousness, floating on the blissful waters of Ananda, 107, infinite bliss. The egg is related to the ego itself, and not just because of their similarity as words, but they are both containers for the identity, 107, and also XYZ, the mathematical field. The universally powerful ego is the I, or ego/ahamkara, consciousness, which is described by Crowley in Liber 729 also, from April 21st, 1914, where he gives this interesting description. Critical glyphs, I saw how these are arranged. When any idea arises, it is recorded automatically in every department of the mind. Each department immediately sends in a report as to how it is affected by the idea. But of course, only those reports which are loud make themselves heard in the consciousness. I got a clear idea of the spider's web structure of the mind. The ahamkara appeared to me like a crystal. 4 hexagonal columns joined to the base, maybe octagonal, I'm not sure, and brought to a blunt point, each point occupying one of the angles of the tetrahedron, which may explain the pyramid phallus symbol. This glowed more or less brightly as each idea was recorded, rather like a telltale electric light which registers a current passing through a machine and gauges it. This crystal bulged or shrank to a certain extent from time to time, but never lost the tetrahedral form. The color of the light was that peculiar gold which jewelers call a rose finish. I am now reminded of the jewel of Mara. This glow is very closely connected with pleasure and pain. I got away from this by understanding it as a mere ganglion or node of the web, and did several mystic stunts. Such is the structure of the ego in vivid terms according to one of Crowley's visions. I too have had similar geometric visions under the influence of both meditation and introspection alone, as well as with the help of substances. This mental geometry is precisely what I've been exploring and delineating with Gematria and the Kabbalah, because these are the geometrical byways on which our minds operate. Mara is the Buddhist equivalent of the deceiver, Satan, and his jewel is similar to that of the fallen starstone of Lucifer's, which brought along with it the fall of man. For when Lucifer, or pure consciousness, was corrupted, the pure state called Eden was shattered into fragments, or separate egos. While this is generally considered a sort of supreme spiritual error, it is actually a necessary function of being, for if there were not a fragmentation or fractalization, there would be no difference and thus no vibration or change by which anything is distinguished from everything else, and thus everything that is would cease to be and dissolve back into the pure absence of the perfect state of Eden, or Sunya, void, or Paradisos, which is, again, 666 in Greek. It is, however, true that there is a spiritual gap, or a missing link, between our true inner or higher selves, spirit, and the source from which it is detached, and this link is the spiritual connection which must be rebuilt in place of the ego. This is why many spiritual practices intend on slowly disempowering the ego from its roots up, which can be not only terrifying to some people who are deeply invested in their own egos, but also seemingly antithetical to many of the ideals of westernized culture, such as the emphasis on material possessions, identity, uniqueness, and originality. And again, I know that there's that duality of so-called, it's New Age and all this fake spirituality, and the fact that a lot of this stuff is secondhand, and it's, devolutions. But again, that's why I think Blavatsky, with all the, same with Crowley, but with all the, like, sort of crap, like the Beavis and Butthead Madame Blavatsky is interpretation. The Beavis and Butthead interpretation of Madame Blavatsky is, the sort of, I don't know, it's just dumb. And you'd have to actually read The Secret Doctrine and then see all the sources, or, the books she references, and the fact that those even go further. And you have to, like, realize the contextual situation and see, yeah, a lot of it does reappear and recycle. And, there's something to be said for all of it, even though that, there's all these, for example, Theosophy. Theosophy had, like, if you read about the history of it, there was all these, like, ego squabbles and squabbles and fights and whatnot. And that's why it's kind of not, it's still around somewhat, but that's what kind of happens to a lot of things, is they serve their purpose for the time being, and then, you have to expect to be able to move on, because nothing is really, set in stone. And so even for all these myths and all this material, its usefulness is only valuable, like, in terms of, in so far as you can basically have a place to put it in your mind. Most people just don't have any care or concern. It's kind of like teaching someone who has no care about cars anything about cars. Like, there's going to be a limitation if they're not heavily interested in cars. And where it's I've kind of seen that for myself. Like, I've had to learn about certain things regarding vehicles and whatnot, and for me, none of that was that interesting. But yet I can learn really detailed information about all this stuff, whereas with vehicles or with certain other subjects, it's more difficult for whatever reason. And it's where you apply yourself. And so I know that there's, like, that's the whole thing, is if you can apply this sort of gradual process to something you're not so good at, then you can obviously get better at it. And that's really the value in all this occult stuff, is that it's like, again, like I've said in a previous post, it's like a muscle. You have to exercise it, and slowly through trial and error, even, you'll strengthen your knowledge and your wisdom. And I just think that it's funny that there's such a resentment for that in so many ways. This is why many spiritual practices intend on slowly disempowering the ego from its roots up, which can be not only terrifying to some people who are deeply invested in their own egos, but also seemingly antithetical to many of the ideals of westernized culture. The truth is that until you tap into the underlying fabric of the mind and consciousness itself, the real bedrock of reality, you will merely be going in circles with the claptrap that resides merely at the surface of a very deep ocean of consciousness. So again, it's like revert all sense and find the sources of your own, find your own center, basically, which is really the real knowledge and conversation of the holy guardian angel, which sounds like some crazy term, but it's really just, to me, the finding of your own, your personal center, not being just your ego, but your actual self beyond time, beyond the present moment, in a way. And it's hard to envision that, but in a way, it's like when you're dreaming, you can kind of get a better, I guess, idea of that, of Silba, so to speak, which is the self, again, beyond this time stations, or the states of waking, dreaming, and deep sleep, and past, present, and future, which is just your whole self, your whole being. And being able to, again, get beyond the bullshit of the present moment, and see how other little things that oftentimes we focus on to the point where we think that they're important when often they're not at all. Getting beyond that is what, to me, again, the dark doorway of the beast and Doth, all these things symbolize, by being that, just getting outside of the cube of the here and the now. And so many things like to keep us in these little boxes, mentally and otherwise. So the fact that there are actual terms and, concepts that show that people have tried at least getting outside of the box of these things, and it just helps. It helps to take them into mind over time. One of the first movies I watched that outlined a sort of spiritual journey was The Holy Mountain by Alejandro Jodorowsky from the mid-1970s, quite a bit before I was born. One of the main scenes that has stuck with me, especially since the appearance of the obsidian egg talisman, which served as a major key in my initiation, is the part where the main character goes up to the top of the tower and meets the alchemist, who then proceeds to prepare the candidate for his own initiation. At one point, the main character is put into a large, clear egg, where he is to apparently reabsorb his own wastes and then once again expel it, so it may be transmuted to gold. This is an obvious metaphor which shows that only through facing our waste and, the dark side in a way, the reabsorbing the parts of us which are unclean so as to understand them and extract the positive aspects, that we can begin the great work and achieve the goal of the alchemist symbolized by enlightenment. And of course, that's going to be taken as negative by people, and it is significant to, again, Freud, people, it makes me think of just the controversy around Sigmund Freud and his theories and whatnot. And it's kind of funny, that's actually the whole image of the Dukatenscheiser, the gold shitter or whatever, the shitter of ducats, the connection between gold and shit. I just think that it's got a comic value to it that's very, just, I don't know, it's just that, it's an irony. It's a very simple, like totemic, totem and taboo. It's very, Freud tapped into this sort of ancient knowledge, I think, and same with Jung and all that, and he's given this negative, they say, oh, he's debunked and all this, but, you can debunk Freud all you want, but his literature and his thoughts, if you actually go read it, has so much value to it that, same with Crowley, like, people could debunk him for a century, but it's not going to diminish the value of his poetry or his insights or even his diaries and stuff. They're interesting. They're funny at times. So I just think that there's nothing you can really do to. How are you going to tarnish the image of something that's already, there's just something that what am I trying to say? There's a paradox in this whole, like, pearls before swine sort of idea. I don't know. It is significant to note also that the cover of the movie contains an egg with a golden key inside of it, which was referred to above in the Amalantra working and throughout this blog as a whole. The gold key of the egg has been expounded quite extensively, and here is what I think it unlocks. In Librael of Eligius, or the Book of the Law, there is mention made of a particular key to be found in a secret word, which Nuit has given him. Librael, chapter 1, verse 20, the key of the rituals is in the secret word which I have given unto him. The him is not Crowley, but the chosen priest mentioned in Librael, chapter 1, verse 15. Now ye shall know that the chosen priest and apostle of infinite space is the prince priest, the beast, and in his woman, called the scarlet woman, is all power given. They shall gather my children into their fold. They shall bring the glory of the stars into the hearts of men. 2 verses later it says, but ye are not so chosen. In AL chapter 2 verse 47 it says, this book shall be translated into all tongues, but always with the original in the writing of the beast. For in the chance shape of the letters and their position to one another, in these are mysteries that no beast shall divine. Let him not seek to try, but one cometh after him, whence I say not, who shall discover the key of it all. Freder Achad thought this to be himself, as he did discover many keys to Librael, and not just the A-L key, which unveiled the mystery of God, all and not, or absence. He also, as is mentioned above, discovered the secret word which Nuit revealed to him as Ma'ayan, the ends of manifestation, a word which appears in the ends of her chapter, verses 1 and 66. The word Ma'ayan has multiple values depending on whether O is taken as An or Vav, as well as if the N is given its regular or final value. This means that Ma'ayan has Hebrew-English gematria values of either 107, 171, 757, or 821. Each one of these numbers gives clues as to the nature of this word and its key-like nature. We have already mentioned that 107 is the number of gold, oval, bitza, an egg, the magic egg, ulam, consciousness or the heart, ananda, bliss, identity, etc. 107 was also the number of years that had transpired since 1904, when I received the obsidian egg on April 2nd, which was 6 days before the actual anniversary, but it was the 107th year. Further showing the importance of this number and this event in relation to the currents of Horus and Maat. The number 171 is the sum of 1 through 18, and when I received the egg, I happened to be 18 years old at the time. This number also happens to be the value of the Hebrew Hey final, which refers to the fourth and final Hey of the Tetragrammaton, which is presided over by Maat. Note also that Nu Maat is 107, and in simple gematria 171 is the number of the supreme key. 171 is also the number of the Anka, the Islamic name for the phoenix, which is said to perpetually reincarnate and symbolic of the ageless wisdom, which is ever new. Note its similarity to the word Ankh, meaning eternal life. When you add 171 Ma'ayan to the secret word 586, we get 757, the number of Ma'ayan in its final value, with the Vav. As 821 with Ayin in non-final, it corresponds, as I've mentioned before, with my own birthday of August 21st, 821, as well as Kaf, or Kaf, basically K, Aleph, and Pei final, which is, again, the Wheel of Fortune, or the Wheel of Time, as well as the Child of Librael, as well as my name, 294, in Jewish gematria, plus Ma'ayan, plus the Eon of Maat in Jewish gematria. Achad took his findings regarding the Ma'ayan very seriously, even going to the extent of using Ma'ayan seals on his letters. He ended up creating a magical order of his own regarding this current, which he called the Fellowship of Ma'ayan, which is mentioned on encyclopedia.com and quoted here. The Fellowship of Ma'ayan, secret magic order founded by Freder Achad, Charles Stansfeld Jones, a close associate and magical child of magician Aleister Crowley. The order was based on interpretations of the Kabbalistic Tree of Life in the Book of the Law, the Thelemic magic text channeled by Crowley. The Book of the Law announces the new Eon of Horus, the Egyptian deity referred to by Crowley as the crowned and conquering child. Jones announced the coming of the Ma'ayan, or Eon of Maat, the Egyptian goddess of truth and justice. The Ma'ayan was to succeed the Eon of Horus, an idea that proved unacceptable to most Thelemic magicians. The fellowship as such no longer exists, but its impetus has been carried on by contemporary Maotian magic groups, such as the Ordo Adeptorum Invisiblum, or OAI. While many indeed do write off Achad's claims, I've had too many personal revelations, many of which far exceed anything that could be claimed as looking too deeply or confirmation bias, because again, a lot of this stuff comes up from before I was born, using the same numbers that apparently recurred with eggs and the cycles, and it's just like kind of like a weird culmination or convergence in a way that, to me, I was like, I'm not going to deny this. As crazy and weird as it may be, I've got to do this. And same with reading this. Like, I know reading this, to me, I'm like, a lot of this does sound like it's crazy, it's weird, it's repetitive. To write this information off and the evidence and information that hasn't ceased in coming through it all, in fact, it is coming in stronger and stronger over time. Not too long ago, so I guess I was saying I don't want to write it off. Not too long ago, I actually also found a liber, or book, from the above-mentioned Ordo Adeptorum Invisiblum titled Liber 107, or Liber Andana, a metathesis of Ananda, from Don Carr, author of Approaching the Kabbalah of Maat. I had known of this text from reading about it online, and even saw it years ago when it was online, but at the time I wouldn't have understood its importance, and it has since been taken down, so I had to ask someone who would have it for a copy, which, thanks to Don's sincerity, I was able to obtain it. Yeah, and he actually sent me like a 40 or 50 page scan of the entire thing, which is pretty cool. The text of Liber Andana was published in 1983, but it is based on the magical workings of the OAI, which you could just say ritual or ceremonial, because magical is a trigger word for people. But beginning in November of 1982, here is an excerpt from the preface. Liber Andana is the name given to a magical working undertaken by the Chicago Ordo Adeptorum Invisiblum during the first week of November 1982, EV. The workings, viewed with the perspective only hindsight can give, proved not only of value to those who participated in them, but seemed to offer information of importance to the larger magical and occult community, hence this publication. The Ordo Adeptorum Invisiblum is a Maotian Thelemic Thelemicist magical order. It is Maotian in that it finds its symbolic focus in the concept of Maat, the ancient Egyptian goddess of order, justice, and truth. Maat is not a deity to be worshipped, rather she is the personification of the ideals, both personal and social, which the order proclaims. The OAI also works out of the reality of thelema, the Greek word for will, and sees its activity as both an expression of and a tool to discover our true will, our particular universal destiny. We do magic. Magic is the art of causing change in line with the true will by use of the cosmic and universal forces available to each of us. Finally, we are an ordered, though non-graded group in that we do magic by the traditional means of ritual and other occult disciplines, meditation, divination, etc. Liber Andana consisted of a magical process focused in two rituals held November 2nd and November 6th of 1982. The workings provided a significant step forward in the full development of the Maotian magic with which the group had been working for over a year. In assembling the records of Liber Andana, we discovered at least 6 items of importance to the larger occult community. Item: the workings proceeded as much by intuition as by design, and the attention given to the intuitive insights contributed substantially to both the final shape and structure of the rituals performed and the resulting success. Item: each participant in the workings made a contribution to its conception, development, writing, performance, and reporting, as well as the process of critique through which it passed. The very process which accompanied these workings proved substantial pragmatic verification, i.e., it works, of a key Maotian building block, the communion of the hive. And again, there's a lot of just synchronicity, even through time, with a lot of these things, these formulas, these resonances. Item, the rituals self-consciously brought together for the first time a number of specifically Maotian magical insights and practices, which the OAI had perceived one by one during the past 2 years. As such, Liber Andana created and defined a new gestalt of magic to which the word Maotian is most appropriately given. Item, as a result of Liber Andana, the ancient wisdom of the Kabbalah has been recast, and its personal truth is now open to infusion by Maotian principles. With this new insight to the Kabbalah, its essence can be utilized most effectively for the goals of the Maotian eon. Item, as a further result of Liber Andana, the specific and distinctive nature of Maotian magical energy, hinted at in the prior work of both the OAI and other Maotian practitioners, was clearly perceived, experienced, and defined. Once defined, it clarified the events of past ritual efforts. Item, finally, Liber Andana marks no less than the beginning of a totally new cycle in the Eon of Maat, first announced April 2, 1948. Liber Andana proclaims the dawn of Maat has returned, and that the period of that dawning began July 17, 1982, and continued until November 29, 1982, during which the planets Pluto and Saturn were conjunct in the sign of Libra. While I do not have the time or effort to provide the entire document at length here, I just wanted to quote the key items which the OAI claimed as a result of Liber Andana because they parallel the results of some of my own Maotian work, which I may add has also served as a way to deeply expand the teachings of the Kabbalah for myself and other more modern and Maotian practitioners, many of whom I have corresponded with in the course of our work, helping one another to further widen our knowledge and understanding, making way for deeper inner wisdom. The name Andana and its corresponding value of 107 are important, as they show that the gold key mentioned above was active all the way through from the time Achad himself died, through the 70s in the work of Grant and Nema, to the 80s with the work of the OAI, not OAO, but OAI, to the 90s and the 2000s with the later work of the Horus Maat Lodge, and Kenneth Grant's later works like Outer Gateways, Beyond the Mav Zone, The Ninth Arch. When I received an obsidian egg on April 2, 2011, 107 years into the Eon of Horus, I was not aware at the time of any of Achad's Maotian or egg material, and so all of this serves to show that the current is still highly active, and even capable of working through people who may not be completely aware of its nature or significance. I personally think that this current is indeed tied in with what Nema discusses in her magical record, quoted in Outside the Circles of Time, dealing with our future ancestors located downwind in the flow of time, even though the general current itself is largely beyond or unaffected by linear time. It is my conjecture that with this new, or at least revitalized knowledge, coming in alongside this current, much in the way of physical and spiritual evolution will be vastly occurring. As Michael Bertaux basically says in his chapter, Maotian Inductions, in his book, The Voodoo Gnostic Workbook, it's as if we are growing into the Eon of Maat and becoming aware of it as it's always been there, rather than it dawning in time on its own. Here is Michael's chapter on Maotian Inductions quoted below. One of the most outstanding characteristics of the Maotian influence in occult physics is to be found in the nature of induction, whereby the evidence for the overlap of this eon is fed into the evaluation system. Normally, the inductive process is characterized by a certain simplicity, or when it is built up into a complex whole, it is built up out of relatively simple logical instances. In the case of the Maotian complex, however, we cannot expect any simplicity, because of the widest range of implications which are involved in the most basic instances and specimens. It would seem that the overriding and all-pervasive quality of this system is complexity at the fundamental level. Yet, this complexity is particularly Maotian, inasmuch as we can say that any quality which may serve to define the newer influence, if it possesses a Maotian origin, will exhibit a definite Maotian arithmosophical property or mathematical property. An example of this may be found in the differences between method models in the system of the Horus Eon and that of the Maotian. In the older system, the method model is based upon a definite of singleness of component operation. It has been discovered, however, in the Maotian system that singleness of any component implies the full range of components that this fuller range of component factors serves to generate in its own development those method spaces which connect the components. As we know, and see I typed this because I couldn't copy it from anywhere on the internet. In the ideal model, there are 8 components. The ideal was rarely if ever applied in the Horus Eon models. However, we are finding that in the Maotian system, we must apply the entire scope of the ideal model in every instance in order to receive the proper Maotian inductions. And again, the 8 is pretty much all about the directional interfaces of things, or the dynamics of time and space-time. Likewise, we must take serious note of the inductions which come from the method spaces which connect the components of the eightfold pattern. There are 7 of these, so that by taking into account all of the components of the system, both the 8 logically defined components as well as the 7 connective method spaces, we arrive at the total of 15 technical factors which must be evaluated in any inductive process of Maotian origin. Of course, we know that 1 plus 5 is 6, which is the number of the eon in question. However, this tendency to amplify and interconnect is characteristic of the whole impact of the Maotian system. By this, I mean that everywhere in the definitional system in question, we find a very noticeable complexity and at the same time a parallel interconnectedness, which is more than mere logical overlap of structures. Rather, aside from all logical questions, we have come to the conclusion that a primordial characteristic and possibly a fundamental property of the Maotian eon is hereby reflected in this interwebbing of structures and patterns. Yet at the same time, this system is totally at variance with any previous connectives and explications, especially any attempts to explain it by the imposition of geometry or even metageometry the Maotian structure. The older methods will simply not be proven adequate, because in a way they do not fit the Maotian system, which requires its own answer models and cannot fall back upon previous and formerly dependable procedures. So again, it's kind of evolutionary itself. Zeitgeist and Zeitalter, Maotian inductions too. The ages of the world and the world spirit of the age form the basis always for the logical methodologies of the exact and empirical sciences. Thus, from the character of the age and its spirit, or Zeitgeist, we may deduce by an exact procedure the general properties of all basic systems operating within that specific eon. So again, it makes me, the whole 8 thing he's talking about, makes me think of Barbelo and Babylon and the 8th eon, or the really even the 14th eon. I mean, it gets complicated, but it's symbolic of that one beyondness, which is typical of, obviously, like the generative power within the shell or the cycle or whatever. But and if this sounds like the magical confirmation of the philosophy of certain idealists, such as Schelling, then it would appear that such views have an inductive basis in the ways in which the ages of the world create and formulate their sciences and logics. And again, that also makes me think of just how history, the development of man, not just man, but I mean, from all the way back to whatever the first life was, it seems to be a cyclical process that it's like the Nautilus shell, whereas each chamber would be like a period or an age, and each one builds on the other. So that's just what it makes me think of. Consequently, it is important to realize that the Maotian eon exhibits very special properties and characteristics, which isolate it from all other periods and which define and allow for the development of a unique Maotian logical system. Hence, if the basis of induction is to be found in the ideal contents which exist in both space and time, in the empirical world of causal connections and psychic fields, then we can say that such a basis is directly created by the eon, inasmuch as only the eon will allow to become embedded in phenomena those ideal patterns which are agreeable to the general essences of the eon. Thusly, the eon. So it's kind of I can kind of get what he's saying. It's just really abstract. It's very. I can't really explain it any more than he is. So, wish I could. But thusly, the eon not only builds the world about itself, but it provides the base. In a way, what I'm thinking of the eon of Maat. If you think of that Nautilus shell idea, the eon of Maat would be that vacuum of the future, obviously. And so, what is that? It's where it's that synonymous with that central axle of which we're going around to make time, space time. That's why again, Ma ion manifestation being 821 is symbolic, as well as the egg and all these things. It's symbolic of manifestation and accumulation. So I don't know. And there is a sort of morphology or sacred geometry, obviously, to all of this. Thusly, the eon not only builds the world about itself, but it provides the basis whereby the eon is known and understood in the scientific as well as the mystical community. Therefore, we can say the world, it's a reflection. The world of the present is known by those methods which exist and are subject to discovery in the present. The exact method of connection between the eon and the systems of logic has been perhaps only recently explored in the magical writings of Whitehead, where, especially in his analysis of the non-statistical ground of induction, he presents a precise argument for the basis of the sciences of logical exploration in the very fact of the immanence of God as an ideal system and field of logical contents, or sophological wholes in nature. So again, in a way, that's the thing, the fact we have a field in the first place, a numerical field or a mental field, is itself a sort of existential conundrum, It doesn't necessarily mean... That's what obviously some people will reason for the existence of God, or some... The thing is, it's a linguistic paradox, because the existence of a higher power outside of existence is kind of paradoxical, except when you get into, again, I guess, oracles or whatever manifestations. But again, then those are only going to be passing because they're or supernatural. But so there won't be much physical evidence except for the experiencer. And so again, it's a big loop. In whatever way you want to look at it, and because again, that quality of the fact everything's spinning, nothing. I mean, things are for a time. They're always changing too. They had a long history, like a book. It's paper, it's trees, it's minerals, it's space dust, and it will be, again. But it went through that loop of potentiality of the void, basically. And somehow it manifested into not just a book, obviously, but anything. I used a book because I was looking over at a book. But any object, again, it's based on our giving it value. Like we give it value. But that doesn't mean nothing has any value. It's just like, that's the thing. We're at a critical point in history where things have so much value cram-packed in there, it's hard to distinguish. And it's actually, like, again, this whole Maotian zeitgeist, what he's saying is that it's a whole new sort of system, operating system is seeping in, and it's going to basically induct or pull up with it what will assimilate in a way, and what won't. Well, I don't know what the process is. It seems to be like a biological process. It will be assimilated in some way, just like the refuse of anything is in some way. But so again, basically, to me, what the Maotian mode of view is symbolic of is, again, the fourth the final hay, which is reflected as the first hay, So you have Yod, He, Vav, He, and it's symbolic kind of to me of that slow development of the fourth, of our understanding of the fourth dimension, but also the tetragrammaton being itself that sort of family, the father, mother, son, daughter, which is funny because people say, oh, like, it's also, everything's the destruction of the family, which there are some things, some impulses toward that, but it's just funny that they say magic and occult and the Judaism or the Kabbalah is used in that subversion, that subversive process, when it could be used for the opposite if only everyone wasn't negative. Like the same people that say all this stuff is being used to brainwash people are also in many cases themselves negatively brainwashed against it all, to where they could be using it to better themselves, to learn, to move beyond, to break through, But so we can see that this view is identical with both the ancient viewpoint of Gnostic magic as well as with the not so presently appreciated 19th century German idealist philosophers such as F.W. von Schelling and the esotericist Franz von Baader. What is most important is to realize that the tendency of certain philosophers has been in the exact direction of the Gnostic and Zotherian modes of analysis. Also, in Zotheria, to me, that's like, I don't know what I'd call it. What comes to mind is imagination, the imagination, which does just sound like a subjective realm of nothing, like virtual reality in a way, but in a way, that's what all reality is. Or not all reality, but a lot of the creative, it's a screen process. And in that can come, it's a testing ground. The imagination is where it's kind of like the astral realm. It's what I was saying in the last post. Like, it's got its properties and the fact that you can do a lot of stuff that you wouldn't want to have to waste the time and effort in the material realm doing, or having the waste of resources and pollution and whatnot. Like pollution in the sense of just like literally just have shit everywhere. Of wastefulness, when you can map things out in your own mind kind of better, or Kabbalistically even, just on paper. It's kind of the whole architectural process. So that's what comes to mind with the Zotheria, and you'll have to look into it in his literature. But also it is important to realize that the logic is not imposed upon the order of nature, but as in the systems of German idealists, logic can be understood as rising out of the order of nature. Logic, in other words, is a pure reflection of the eon, or the consciousness of the zeitgeist. The Zotherian system is therefore interchangeable with the German idealist as well as the Neoplatonic and Gnostic, just as the inductive magics and Gnostic physics of von Schelling and Franz von Baader were interchangeable with similar systems in Bruno and Proclus. And it is from this carefully built-up logical basis that the speculative physics of each new eon is to be derived from the spirit of the age, the zeitgeist, which is the logos of that eon, or the manifestation of the merging absolute spirit in nature. And it's like each age had its own little quality, and people looked at things and consciousness and mankind itself in a certain light. The logos, or word or reason, i.e. logic, of the Maat current is veiled under 3 different words according to 2 different people. Frieder Achad announced in 1926 the word of the eon, which Crowley had failed to utter, and he claimed it was alalia, with a value of 103 and meaning unspeakable or speechless, from the root alala, which also means the same thing, but with a yod, so it was 93. The original Masonic number of the lost word. However, he also claimed that Ma'ayan was the secret word of the key of the rituals, and also veiled the eon of Maat, and the number of this word he specified as 107. In 1974, with the reception of Liber Pene Praenumbra, a woman who was at the time also unaware of Achad's Maat work, who also took the name Nima Andahadna or Margaret Ingalls, proclaimed that the word of the eon was ipsos, meaning by the same mouth, and with various values, whether S is taken as shin or samek, and also the an or vav interchange. It is significant that when the values of all three of these formulas are put together, 103 plus 107 plus 456, the number of the beast sits at 6 is obtained. Such would be a qualitative confirmation to Crowley that his adepts were onto something. If we try to interpret these three words together, we get something to the effect of the unspeakable ends of manifestation spoken by the same mouth. This could mean that the conceptual beginning and end of manifestation are one, and that the word of creation is spoken by the same mouth or by the same soul, or at the same level in a way when you consider the whole fact that Allah, the word of the breath, basically, which is the secret word, Frederick Chad talks about in Liber Liber 31. Such an interpretation would tie right in with the concept of nonlinear, archonic, or overarching, para-Brahmanic consciousness operating from beyond our linear fractional selves. And the here and now, the present moment. Eulalia, Ma'ayan, and Ipsos is thus an apt formula for the current which the Ma'at archetype represents, being related to such concepts as truth, justice, balance, measurement, mathematics, fullness, and especially the matrix of being. This current of sits at 6 is one which is very integral to our both spiritual and technological advancement as human beings on Earth. It is a major key itself which was obviously important enough to be mentioned multiple times in the Bible, not only in just Revelation 13:18, but also in Ezra 2:13. The sons of Adonikam are numbered at 666, and in 1 Kings 10:14, Solomon is said to receive yearly the weight of 666 talents of gold. Adonikam is actually, according to its reiteration in Nehemiah 7:18, is really enumerated at 667, a number which also has a unique significance to be analyzed as its Liber AL Veligus with Achad's added A key. 666, or 666, is also a number mentioned meticulously throughout this blog, and it is significant that since this blog is all about the egg, 666, in a way, veils the spiral EGG letters. And, as we can see in the quote from Blavatsky, the sun and the egg, and the moon, as well as the soul and the universe itself, are all related to 666. In this spiral, either inward turning towards 666, the heart and soul, or outward, as in 999, the foundation of Yesod. The more negatively polarized aspects of certain 666 gematria values were analyzed in the last post, while in this one I want to analyze some of the more positive ones, which will certainly serve as a sort of set of keys to many gates which have hitherto been locked. It must be taken into deep consideration, especially for those who may be completely stubborn and skeptical of the formula, that many of these codes which are being provided with basic Hebrew gematria letter values applied to the transliterated equivalents in English, which correspond with certain particular ancient concepts, even English itself precisely corresponding with Hebrew, which is much older than itself, English, obviously says something about its importance as a valuable tool for at least basic Kabbalistic analysis. The problem here, of course, is we are definitely lacking as individuals and as a whole at merely even looking at, let alone digging deeply into the mystical and magical storehouse that is the Kabbalistic tree of life and the gems which it holds. It is almost as if there were a reason this were so. Now is the time we are going to begin to bring certain information to light with the tried and true practices of Kabbalistic analysis. And we are going to open a mystery that has been left secreted under a fog of uncertainty, speculation, doubt, and the profound unknown. This is the mystery of the Giza pyramids. It is very significant that the letters of these words happen to equal 666. For the understanding of them is just what conveys the entire biblical meaning of the number of a beast or the number of man. He who can reach understanding, Bina, can enter the city of pyramids. And yeah, I was just surprised and shocked when I found this. I was like, holy fuck. maybe there's something to it. And I just think that there is. I think it's like symbolic of, it's very Masonic. The ritual, again, being mainly referring to the ritual of the Book of the Dead, but also just the general ritual around the sun or around the circle, around the fire, the ceremonial circle, the circle being 666. It's all very, electric. It's very ritual, ceremonial. And the fact that there is a connection between Moses and Egypt and the Kabbalah and, Coptic Gnosticism, the Gnostic mysteries, it all kind of connects. So I'm not surprised now. I was surprised at first. It was very fun. It was fun to do this, like to decipher this stuff. And Elizabeth Van Buren talks about, like in Lord of the Flame especially, the secrets about the pyramids being written into the code, like into them basically, and someone in the future being able to decipher them, which for whatever reason other people haven't. I don't know why, but I guess it just takes some hindsight, which is 2020. It should be taken in mind that most of this, Crowley himself probably was not aware at the time because he did not have the luxury of a computer, but that just goes to show how brilliant he was without one, along with all those great minds who came before us. And apparently, of all those great minds, very few have been able to offer insight into the definitive mysteries, primarily centering around the Great Pyramid of Khufu, also called Cheops, the Ikhet. First of all, it should be noted that 666, or 666, is again the number of Liber El Vel Legis, and that most people, even in the OTO community, again, OTO, AN 130 plus Tau 406 plus 130, at least that I'm aware of, because I've scoured the internet and talked to some of even the highest people, even discussing gematria at length with Nima for a time. No one really thinks much of gematria, at least publicly. Much less Grant's mentioning of the Ma'ayan or Freder Achad. Probably don't know that. I actually realized it on my own, along with many other things that make it all the more personally significant. And I've never seen either Crowley or Grant mention it, and no one else for that matter, which I later did. On Lashtal, people have talked about some of this stuff. And that's the thing, if no one realizes this stuff, and that's why I personally don't find any value, at least at this time, in group work with official groups, and therefore also if any of this happens to be above and beyond what some people in such groups may find acceptable, well, I have taken no official oaths but my own, and the fact of the matter is it should be your duty to be collecting this knowledge and dispensing of it appropriately to our brethren, yourselves or ourselves, if we were truly of as high esteem as many of these stagnant orders and lodges seem to think themselves. And that's the problem, is a lot of people in these like forums and groups and whatnot, they only go by like the book and by the word of Crowley himself only, and it's like, I don't know, I don't think even Crowley would do that. Like, that's such a, because Crowley himself was like, do things and then and test them, like, don't just take my word for it. And so since no one else will, we shall let the fool. At the outset, it should be noted that it is about to be the 111th year of the Aeon of Horus, and 111 is the dual-wanded one. Dual-wanded being 1111, obviously self-explanatory, known in Liber AL as Hrumachis. 111 is also the full value of the first Hebrew letter Aleph, which corresponds with the Fool Tarot card, and it is highly significant that Aleph and its value of 111 are the first and only Hebrew letter to have a triple value, as if to try and show a reference to the Kabbalah of 9 chambers. It's kind of like a start here number. Here we see this phrase has a value of 666, again in Hebrew English gematria, showing that this formula is highly integrated with the Kabbalah itself, as it is the whole Kabbalah, which is summed up in these 9 chambers. In the last post, I mentioned how 666 was the electricity formula, but it is also the electric force itself, which comports the perceived force of destruction, along the path of the 9 chambers. Again, it's also the life force in a way. More about electricity and electronics will be written about in future posts. Considering a single word from each chamber, we can see a sort of current being carried, which expresses the microcosmic circuit of electric force, but also the macrocosmic. 111 being love. Love is the formula of magic itself. Duality. It also corresponds with Malkuth, the 1 and 0, where the magic happens. 222 is charge, which is also very electrical. 2 is the dyad in which the electric force becomes separated from the Atzilith at Chakma. 222 is also breathe. So that's also a sort of back and forth oscillatory thing. 333, ground, the synthesis of the 2 grounds in a third. So yeah, 3 is very grounding. 4 is kind of more so, but the amplification of love into the material realm of space-time spirit matter. Also, it is the function of Avalokitesvara or Guanyin, the Buddha of compassion. Yeah, it's very a hearty number, I think. For some reason, I just think of the heart chakra. Even though 555 is the central chamber, its master, 5 is the middle of the spectrum and is thus the grand balancer, i.e. Mayat. Mayat plus balance plus Harlequin. So Mayat as the Harlequin with the balance. See the Book of Thoth, where Crowley mentions the adjustment card's relation to Mayat, who holds the balance and basically being the Harlequin. 666 is destruction. This is the spirit of destruction which is necessary for the process of change and evolution. Again, it is also the electric current which is the Kundalini Shakti power. 666 is also the great distraction, i.e. the siphoning or the parasitization of the soul power, the electric power. 777 or 777 is revelation, and 7 is a number of the light force, and its understanding comports liberation. And I ended up finding out I actually made a typo. This is actually the 5 would make it more than 777. 888 or 888 is manifestation, I believe with a vav. So in a way it's kind of like a variation of the whole Ma-ion concept, but equating with 888. 8 is the feedback loop, and its center point is the nexus of microcosm and macrocosm, the within and the without. And 999 or 999 is the story. This signifies the completed story, the supreme knowledge of the strange loop egg, which comports the endless spiralic nature of manifestation, which, like an egg with a strange loop, i.e. a strange loop arises when, by moving only upwards or downwards through a hierarchical system, one finds oneself back where one started. Kind of like the whole Pac-Man idea, where if you go off the screen, you just come back. It is this particular zone which the current of Mayat magic resonates. And Mayat magic, the title of Nima's book, is also 999. Note K in its final value of Kaf or 500, but Gematrix will not calculate final values. So yeah, if you just calculate it yourself, again, because artificial systems won't take into account some of these nuances that are entirely within the Kabbalistic rules, like non-final or Ayin or Vav or Cheth and Gimel. These are the basic keys to what the 9 chambers represent. But it should be known that these chambers are infinitely deep as they expand with the OOO or Ein Sof Or, the limitless light. And basically, that's the thing, is people say don't personalize things, but the thing is you can. If you look at your whole world through numbers, you will find they correspond with more objective realities because it's an emanation from that, or emerges from that. So, in using the same laws, it's just that you can't expect other people to, see things from your point of view. 9 being the spiral pointing down and outward, it is symbolic of the open or awakening Kundalini force lying coiled at the base of the spine, which contains all personal potential power. When this Hebrew-English gematria formula is applied to the pyramids, it unveils some interesting things. First, we must also note again, for the sake of seeing again how all this adds up, that Egypt itself is 107, the gold egg. And again, Egypt being the sort of like center of gold, gold being the center or the symbol of spiritual knowledge, which also connects to what Amalantra conveyed to Aleister Crowley and Friedrich Schott in 1918 about the gold key being found in an egg in a desert, and that they were to go to Egypt. Like it says in Liber Andana, much of this can only be understood now with a hindsight's view, meaning there is still much room for expansion. Do you think the Hebrews knew of the word electric back when they were talking about 666 over 2,000 years ago? Obviously not, because English and all this wasn't developed yet. It's a sort of emergent thing. English is naturally configured to this logos. Remember the zeitgeist of the current or of the time. And so we see using it that this entire situation regarding the key of it all and the gold key show that the key of it all is the Hebrew-English gematria formula itself, which fills, it's again the key to the whole Kabbalah. The Kabbalah of 9 chambers, which fills many gaps which were hitherto a seemingly unfathomable abyss between science and religion, east and west, past and future, mind and body, spirit and matter. Gold is 107 using this formula, and corresponding with AL chapter 3 verse 31, there cometh a rich man from the west who shall pour his gold upon thee. The man from the west with the gold is 1331 with none final. A key number of my own name, which is 13 letters and contains its reflection, 31, the number of the verse and the key of AL. It is important here that we are going through the various connective nuances of this historical sequence, as it is a rather complex though highly intricate and precise pattern when looked at from a distance. All of these different currents come together like a spiderweb to an apex located at the Cairo Pyramid Complex and the eastward-facing Sphinx. Readers of Liber Akbish, the Book of the Spider and the Ninth Arch, will be familiar with much of these concepts and the timeless nature of the weaver Akbi, which equals 102, the number of the magician Mayan, who weaves the web of Shin or Set, the fire spirit or fire serpent, across the gulfs of time and space only to focus on Earth, the tunnels under Cairo in particular, as its chosen place to figuratively plant its clifothic spider alien eggs, which will hatch to bring you the Eon of Maat, as it says, Lamb is Akbi, 102, Liber Akvish, chapter 1, verse 5. Thus, the coiled lamb serpent is seen as synonymous with the spider Akbish itself and its self-created web. And again, remember that the spider writing is 666. In a way, just being self-descriptive of all this gematria being the spider writing. The Lion's Gate, which has been pretty much given the date of August 8th, I ended up finding, if you calculate it, it's actually 888, and is equivalent to Isus, or Jesus, the cosmic Christ level of consciousness, which the gold spirit of Christ, known as Chrysos, which is yet another 107, corresponding precisely with gold. Note also that Grant mentions in Outside the Circles of Time that Ma-Ion is also the name of the angel ruling Leo. The lion has long been connected with the symbol of the key, and thus we see further how all these mysteries, the riddle of the Sphinx, the egg of Iwas, lamb, and the key of it all, tie in together as the key to the pyramids. For the Ennead, or Sacred Nine, Ennead and 9 being 115, Neter, or aspects of Atum, God, basically, the one God in its multiple forms, or principles, the 9 chambers within the egg, which can be fathomed as the 7 rays in the polarization of yin and yang, white and black, or black and white. What is ironic is the fact that there are many companies that use Kabbalistic symbolism, either knowingly or not, all over the place. For example, most people are familiar with the entertainment corporation, Lionsgate Entertainment, but there is also even an Ennead Architects group which specializes in designing cultural, educational, governmental, and scientific not-for-profit institutions. When you consider some of the other major names, such as Paramount Pictures, Paramount means having supreme power, more important than anything else, DreamWorks Studios, see DreamWorks in psychoanalysis, perhaps another synchromistic speculation could be in the fact that in the Matrix movie, which has many Gnostic influences, was distributed by Warner Brothers. And in this movie, the main character, Neo's passport, happened to have expired on the date of September 11th, 2001, the same as that of, obviously, the 9/11 attack. And I know that's some conspiratorial speculation, but I didn't make it. I mean, I'm just saying it's warning. I mean, they could have. It's not really a warning because I mean they've made tons of other stuff. Why would it be? Why would this be any more important? But I don't know. It's just strange. So I don't really believe that, but I do think that these people probably know a thing or two about the origins or the meanings of these terms. Ironically, yet another architecture group here in this matrix, the Saudi bin Laden group, SBG, happened to register their internet domain name on September 11, 2000, exactly 1 year previously, meaning the 9/11 incident was probably planned much in advance. I mean, at least the date is... It comes up on certain Masonic capstones and other things, but the movie itself was released on March 31st, 1999, though this is not the only incident of this number, 9/11, in various movies and television shows, leading one to wonder how much of this numerological knowledge is known about and used in these programs. But again, 9 and 11 are very Kabbalistic, being they ward the 10, not 10 and not 9, 10 and not 11, is what it says in the Sefer Yetzirah. The number 9/11 is worked into many different programs and movies before 9/11/2001. And it's even in one of the shows I remember seeing when I was very young called The Secret World of Alex Mack. Yeah, I forgot all about that. And the day she gets her powers is September 11th. And there's also an episode called The New World Order. Yeah, and they go try to find her and they mention the day. Well, in the whole show, they're trying to, capture her. The people at the company. Many references like this in that show when I was a kid, for whatever reason, just because she had magical powers, I was very intrigued by it. And so you could say it kind of stimulated my interest in the occult in some ways. Not that, I know that the allure of magical powers is something, for whatever reason, kids especially are, intrigued by, but many references like this are riddled throughout much of this material. But as Grant mentions numerous times, 9 and 11 are the Ob and the Odd, the astral and magic, i.e. Qliphothic lights, or basically the light and the shadow. The egg, 11, in its gestation, 9. 11 plus 9 is, of course, 20, which is the I, 5 plus 10 plus 5, of Doth. And Yod, it becomes apparent that this code is either being used consciously or possibly not. See, again, I think it's a little bit of both. Sometimes people are conscious, sometimes they're not. When you realize that September 11th ritual itself has a value of 777, and many people have in the last few years brought up many connections between this event and number. Again, because 7, what do you think of when you see 777? It's that casino number, that alignment number. And the word lottery is 333, which is, again, another alignment. That's what this all has to do with, is the fact that things repeat, cycles, numbers, it's all kind of within a limitation. Things will repeat, but within those, that's the whole theory behind magic, or sympathetic magic, is that with correspondences, you can allow things to like the energy or the electricity to channel, especially from the sun over time and whatnot. That's what agriculture is obviously based on. And so that's the whole theory behind mechanics and all this stuff, is, arranging the proper mediums so as to better channel the energy. The 9th Hebrew letter is Teth, which corresponds with the tarot card Lust, featuring Leo the lion as the beast, with Babylon on his back. in the Thoth deck at least. Otherwise, in the other decks, she's like opening his mouth. So that's also symbolic of controlling the animal or the beast, the animal, the lower self. The formula of Babylon and the beast are also yet another expression of the formula of non-identity. The Grail of Babylon, obviously in the whole Thelemic description of it, and identity, i.e. the mask of the beast or the mark of the beast. Again, being that Malkuth symbol. The 9th degree, OTO, is that of basic sex magic between male and female under these formulas. It is also related under the symbolism of the egg girt with a serpent, and veiled under the number of Zadi, 90, which again, you got the egg and the serpent, which is not the star, or the star of Nuit. 90 shows the 9 degrees, or the serpent with the egg. 90 is the value of pi, or 80 plus 10. The 17th Greek letter, which is also the formula of the spiral, which also emanates from and to form the egg. 107 is thus pi containing the egg, and 90 plus 17, which again, Zodi and the 17th tarot card, or the 9th degree empowered by Pe, the tongue, which is the word made flesh. For there are 17 muscles in the human tongue. The mouth and the tongue are major symbols of Maat, and so 107 is the gold egg, mouth, tongue, serpent, and all of these are also related to what Lamb embodies as the egg-shaped cranium who speaks through silence by the same mouth, as the Kundalini serpent power. So basically it's that creative force within, which has been called the lion serpent, or Canubis, or Abraxas. Thus, Maat is a more clean version of Babylon, focusing more on truth and justice rather than Kalinian revenge. And Lamb is the mask of the beast in its transpersonal, other, or alien form, rather than the lower carnal animal, beast, or egoic form. Sex magic is thus a primary mode of unlocking certain higher or lower atavisms so as to better guide and enhance the process of evolution. You're probably not going to get very far in terms of evolution with sex robots. Thus, it is supremely significant that one of the ancient Egyptian words for the immortal magic force of the soul itself, Aku, pronounced Aku, has yet again a value of 107, 1 plus 100 plus 6, linking it with the spirit of gold. Alright, so pretty much 2 weeks, well actually like 17 days, I don't know exactly, it was I think 16 yesterday, since pretty much last time I was reading this. I actually read the whole thing, and half of the video where I had like stopped at some point, I didn't save the second half of the recording. So yeah, a lot has happened in this rift of 17 days. And like I traveled and had a lot of realizations, got sick, had some back pain out of nowhere, and it's caused me to think about a lot of stuff, knowing, like, having already been thinking about this, and like I realize every fucking post, excuse my French, but I am French, so every post causes something to happen, it seems like, and it's getting really difficult to continue reading each one of these, but I'm going to, as long as I can. So yeah, that's pretty much halfway, a little less, but I said, Grant never mentions it, but perhaps he leaves it to be intuited that 29, the number of the Book of the Spider, is that of Hadit, with a teth. The full Bindu, which is synonymous with the dense Muladhara Lam Malkuth. Well, and again, Hadit is related to Hades and the inner hells, or like it's really the inner zones or the inner spheres of the tree of life. And that whole Kether within Malkuth, Malkuth within Kether, accordion sort of idea is, I think, related. And so since 29 is the I, 19 plus 10, or the ego slash Ahamkara, which Crowley described in the quote up above, which is like a geometric crystalline construction composed entirely of various levels of mind, which can be fathomed as the different levels of the 9 chambers of the astral light, or Azoth. The cultivation or production and strengthening or potentiating of this substance in the magical being is the general aim, as it is the primary essence generating life and consciousness itself, and is generally depicted as the egg-shaped aura surrounding the body. And I was like recently reading, maybe it's important that actually, that's what I was thinking, is that since this whole thing got deleted, it's important that I re-go over this, so I'm not really upset or angered about it. Whereas originally, like, all these little hiccups and bumps, and even really YouTube's sort of censorship in the first place is what kind of made me want to do the videos. And then now that there's like little problems and stuff, at first I was kind of annoyed and irritated, but now I'm seeing, in a way, those are like little, speed bumps in a way to get you to slow down and look at things. And let's see. Yeah, the number 29, and then also 429 in the Book of the Spider, Liber 29, are both mentioned as being these like very important numbers of what not only Grant was looking for, but also Crowley and these Kerwins and Phineas Black, this sort of like alchemist in Against the Light. And the whole thing about Against the Light being about these like time cycles, but they're not necessarily, they're kind of like, I don't know, they're just, it's weird. Like in the Ninth Arch, if you read it, he brings in all these different like time cycles that in some ways, like various ways, they kind of come together, mainly through numerological like overlaps. And then you're more able to see, I guess, like, I don't know. It seems strange and weird and crazy, but like having myself kind of had these sort of weird overlaps that I was skeptical of, but they, like I said, it kind of took me I kind of was like, okay, this is just enough, too much. I have to look at what's going on. And so I did. And slowly I realized, holy shit, there's this whole system, it seems like, already there, really, but needing an update. And like the update is really there, like it's seeping in from all these obvious realizations. And then to see that there's like terminology, like the Eon of Truth and Justice being 999, and the incoming of the Eon of Mayat, and like just all these things about the same formula coming in, and what Michael Bertot says about the eons, and they're sort of like how they inform or infuse what ends up happening in the eon. But so yeah, and it has everything to do with the egg and all this. So in A Dictionary of Symbols by J.E. Serlo, he summarizes some of the prime meanings of the egg. Egg. A great many prehistoric tombs in Russia and Sweden have revealed clay eggs which have been left there as emblems of immortality. And again, okay, 429. I wasn't going to say it because it just sounds like it's way out of left field, but obviously the alchemy and alchemists, they want immortality. But the problem with that, it comes along with like time, and it comes with all sorts of problems if it were even just philosophically. But 429, yeah, immortality. And Kenneth Grant breaks it down as 418 plus 11. And 418 has a lot to do with, obviously, life, the life force, being 18 with a tau. That's basically chit, the mind, but then 11 being a lot of things itself, obviously, too, and the egg. And 418, obviously, being one of Crowley's popularized numbers. In the language of Egyptian hieroglyphs, and hieroglyph. I'm just saying, it's like all over the place. Hieroglyph. Yeah, it's just fresh in my mind because I go over this shit a lot. But the determinative sign of the egg representing potentiality, the seed of generation, the mystery of life. And again, another thing that's happened recently is the Grand Grimoire I was able to finally obtain. And when you spell it out, it's 815, which is Dracontes in Greek, but then also Zoe, which is life. And there's an Omega with 15, obviously. That's the 15th letter is O. There's a lot of connections with that, but it's basically the 15 is also Gaia, so it's like the Earth, basically. And the Earth, the dragon, life. There's the 15 being the lower O, or Omicron, and then Omega. It's like OO, the beginning of Oon, so it's got the egg quality also. And I've just analyzed it somewhat, and 815 seems to have everything to do with this whole macrocosm in a way and microcosm, and sort of that reflection or the hourglass that Kenneth Grant's talking about in all throughout the Ninth Arch, and the hourglass of basically in it, the whole thing about the tree of life, the middle pillar, and it creates this toroidal time space or eon space-time continuum. And it's fucking weird. It's just crazy. So yeah, the container for matter, for thought. This meaning persisted among the alchemists, who added explicitly the idea that it was the container for matter and for thought. Again, thought, 107. In this way was the transition affection from the concept of the egg to the egg of the world, a cosmic symbol which can be... So again, it's that micro and macrocosmic connection, which can be found in most symbolic traditions, Indian, Druidic, etc. The vault of space came to be known as an egg, and this egg consisted of 7 enfolding layers. That's what I was talking about. It's like the Enochian ethers also come to mind, betokening the 7 heavens or spheres of the Greeks. The Chinese believed that the first man had sprung from an egg dropped by Tian from heaven to float upon the primordial waters. The Easter egg is an emblem of immortality, which conveys the essence of these beliefs. And then Ishtar, and that again goes back down to the descending to the hells and back, basically. That's symbolic, again, of the time cycle, in the cycle of manifestation. The golden egg, I think I retyped this, I don't know. The golden egg from which Brahma burst forth is equivalent to the Pythagorean circle with a central point or hole. So again, also in certain Indian myths, the Sipapu, or the hole of their little home, is it's like Doth, basically, in a way, and it's where they say everything comes from. But it was in Egypt, again, 107 in gold, that this symbol most frequently appeared. So obviously, again, and I've talked about I end up talking about in this blog how 107 looks similar, like in the numerical form. I don't know what the term would be, but 1 being like the head and the beak and the neck of a bird, the O being the body, and then the 7 being symbolic of the colors or the plumage. So like the peacock or the turkey, or the phoenix. Egyptian naturalism, the natural curiosity of the Egyptians about the phenomena of life, must have been stimulated by the realization that a secret animal growth comes about inside the closed shell, whence they derived the idea by analogy that hidden things, the occult, or what appears to be non-existent, may actively exist. And another word came to me recently, and it literally just popped into my head, and I thought to calculate it, and it's thanatosis. So with a tau, thanatosis, it's and what it is when like an animal, like a rat or something, is about to be struck by a snake, and it like just freezes, partially out of conscious, like knowing, like just fear, but then also it's just nervous system freezes up, and in somewhat in hopes to like evade, but without actually moving, obviously. And there's other definitions for thanatosis, like even when you turn a frog upside down and like compress some part of it, it can be like immobilized. And so basically it's just a state resembling death. And so obviously 666 being, again, the ritual like of the Book of the Dead and this solar number and the circle and all this stuff about basically what the Egyptian tradition pretty much conveys, this whole like religion, this whole resurrection idea basically. And it's not even necessarily like reincarnation in an egoic sense, so much as it is, in my mind, like a sort of hard drive or a data device, in which simply by parsing or breaking it up into various logical, contextual like formats, you can end up seeing just various images in a way. It's like a graphical device, as much as it was apparently like a timekeeping device. And it's like I don't know, it's just very weird. And I know I'm like probably going to be like crucified for saying all this stuff, but I mean, to me, it's just obvious. But in the Egyptian ritual, the universe is termed the egg conceived in the hour of the Great One of the dual force. The god Ra is displayed resplendent in his egg. An illustration on a papyrus in the Oedipus Egypticus of Kircher, chapter 3, 124, shows the image of an egg floating above a mummy, signifying hope of life hereafter. The winged globe and the beetle pushing the ball along have similar implications. See, I must have typed this some late hour of the night. The Easter time custom of the dancing egg, which is placed in the jet of a fountain, owes its origin, according to Crape, who refers only to the Slavs, to the belief that at the time of the year the sun is dancing in the heavens. The Lithuanians have a song which runs as follows. The sun dances over a mountain of silver. He is wearing silver boots on his feet. Right after this, on the section on Egypt, Serlot says it is a traditional symbol of the animal in man. Hence, to go out of Egypt is to abandon the sensual and the material and to progress towards the promised land across the Red Sea and the desert, to progress towards a superior transcendent state. The symbol is a Gnostic one. So it's like going out of the egg itself. So the egg and Egypt are both symbolic of the totality of the great work of mankind. Crowley already said the great work was symbolized by the number 11, or the union of the pentagram, microcosm, and hexagram, or macrocosm, which is the number of the knowledge, doth, 11, of the egg, 11. The great work is the work of the egg, which is found contained in the egg itself, and this blog, It's All in the Egg. And again, I didn't know any of this stuff would culminate in such a sort of like big thing, but which comes from the exhortation by Amalantra. He also said that the egg is a work which must be done, the great work. By doing the work, we get to the key. The aim of the great work is focused, at least for the most part, at the region of Tifereth. By getting here, we get to the key. And again, Tifereth 1081 or 1081 is 360 plus 360 plus 360 with the dot in the center. So it's like that ring chaos, ring pass not, or whatever, of Dion Fortune in the cosmic doctrine. All those different the 3 different rings, Ein Sof, or Ein Sof, and Ein Sof Or also. And those create, again, that toroidal sphere. By getting here, we get to the key, that is, the key of the abyss, which is focused at the region of Doth, 11. Doth is the double horizon of Horus, the sun, and the key of Horus, or Ra, is the unspeakable word, which in that whole myth of Ra and Isis and his name, or his true word, that is the true name of every initiate and equivalent to Alalia, unspeakable, Almala, the soul of naught, or Mabon, the crowned babe. And yeah, it's basically a formulation of So it's like that point in the center of the circles. And the whole Kaphnia idea of being the true within of even all that. And Kaphnia being the true within, or the other side of that, I guess. These all comport the similar notion of the egg and the babe therein, for if we add the 4 elements to 103, the number 107 is again obtained. And if you double that, it's 111. 107 is also the number of Amsu, the risen Horus. And so it took me a while, but I ended up realizing risen Horus is also 666. Who represents the inner immortal spirit, the Aku, who has risen beyond the 2 truths of the double horizon of life and death. Amsu was one of the first risen or resurrected gods, and thus connects with the gold of Chrysos or Christ. The opening of the double horizon is the balancing of the inward and outward polarities of the Horus Vav aspect of the Tetragrammaton by the final He, represented by Maat, who, according to Achad, has a lesser cycle called Ma'ayan, which is terrestrial and temporal, as seen in the curious manifestations typical to that current of influence, particularly centering around the symbol of the egg, and the egg is thus a symbol of the gateway out of time and space, or the hatch, basically, the final He being that, like, the hatching of the egg. A conceptual time machine of sorts, which may be why a large majority of extraterrestrial or interdimensional spacecraft appear as oblong, oval, or egg-shaped, along with a great many of their occupants' own craniums being reported as similar in shape. So this whole oblong, like, and obviously the oval is a sort of deviation of the circle. And so the whole Cliffothic idea is kind of obvious. The 9th degree mentioned above is the formula for opening the double horizon, which opens the gate of manifestation beyond and between the 9 chambers, which is synonymous with the cosmic egg encapsulating the universe. And the Masonic symbolism is like very connected to all of the Kabbalistic, obviously, symbolism. It's kind of where it's been stored for a long time. And obviously the 2 pillars and then that solar circle with the dot is symbolic of a lot of this. And then also just the arch. I mean, you could go on and on about it. But also, yeah, the 9 chambers, the 9 arches. Multiplying the 9 planes of manifestation inside the gold 107 egg, 963 is obtained, which is the number of anastasis in Greek, meaning resurrection or rising again, typical of the phoenix and the cosmic egg. And I've talked about 963 a lot, being 369 reversed and Achad in full, which Kenneth Grant mentions that in Outside the Circles of Time, but I think that's symbolic of a lot of stuff. This number represents the fullness of the egg itself, being that of Achad in full, Aleph, Cheth, and Daleth, and meaning the fullest unity, as well as the phrase everything is connected and the ultimate perfection. Perfection being yet another highly significant formula, one of the highly significant formulas of Maat, wherein the all of Hadith is reflected in the mirror of the space-time matrix in its fullest, most monstrously hideous, bestial form, as conceived from a human standpoint. 963 is actually the key of Maat, and it is the reflection of Sophia, the goddess of wisdom, whose number is 369. Note that by adding Hadith 29 to 963, we get 992, the number of the key of it all, which I think is, 31 times 32? Which is veiled in Hadith's chapter of Library L. The triangular numbers 3, 6, and 9 are the numbers which Nikola Tesla referred to when he said, if you only knew the magnificence of the 3, 6, and 9, then you would have the key to the universe. The 3, 6, and 9 represent the conduits or pathways that force, or energy and information, manifest through to form materia. The other numbers, 1, 2, 4, 5, 7, and 8, represent the already manifested ingredients of materia. Thus, the structure of all things material is dependent on the sequence and pattern force takes via the 3, 6, and 9 conduits. The sequence changes to form the pulses, the waves of force found forming and supporting all things commonly known as fields. So, and I've pretty much like examined a lot. Like if you have to look at the field of numbers, and their patterns, especially with like the sums, what they call the mystic numbers or the triangular numbers, the multiplication or times tables, and then also the primes, and then also their geometric relationships or correspondences. And you'll see that, holy shit, there's something going on that's like no one is consciously constructing and conspiring to do. It's a product of the limitations of number and also the functions of language, I guess. So it's really not that surprising. That's why I'm not saying it's like a supernatural thing. It's just a super conscious thing, because it's subconscious too, but it's also subconscious. I think I'm starting to think subconscious is more related to the memory and habit and stuff, whereas the superconscious is more like the active calculating processes of the brain, and like I think it's a spectrum, and I don't know, there's a lot to all this, and I'm slowly trying to map it out. But Sophia in Hebrew English gematria with the shin is equivalent to Nuit in Hebrew English gematria, both valuing at 466, which is also wormwood, all of which are goddess feminine Venusian forms. Whereas Nuit is the goddess of infinite space, Maat is the inner space in which space appears within, i.e. the matrix of the mind, or really also the lattice, the quantum fucking nature of that space also is what I think. Each one, because that's kind of what Kenneth Grant ends up saying also. Each one of these veils different layers of the goddess, which represents the gate beyond the numbers. Again, this gate is further veiled under the symbolism of the ninth arch, the royal arch, which spans the dual horizon. Nuit herself is depicted as this self-same arch on the Stela of Revealing, and pretty much everywhere else, which was found by Crowley to be significantly numbered 666 in the Bullock Museum inventory. The goddess is the doorway, and the doorway in Hebrew is veiled under the letter Daleth, which crosses over Doth and spans the dual horizon of Chakma Bina, or time and space. Nuit, as the goddess of space-time, is thus seen as equivalent to Sophia, not merely in a numerical sense, but also since they both represent the bridge of understanding, experience, and wisdom, gnosis, which unites duality through dissolution and differentiation. Daleth is also related to Venus, which in its negative expression equates with the poison of wormwood as the revenge of Kali. Wormwood would be the polluted waters of Binah, both exoterically in terms of physical pollution such as oil spills and nuclear waste, as well as the psychological pollution in all its many forms. The gate of the goddess is symbolized by the vesica, which is created by the bi-O form, or double O mentioned in the last post, when the edges of the two O's are aligned with each other's center point. The nexus of the two spheres is the womb of Nuit, where -1 or not 1 and +1, or the empty O of Nuit and the full O of Nuit, come together to generate the light of Rahu or Kuit. So a sort of eclipsing and that in a way could be what happens with any sort of data or sphere or circle or whatever, just any system. The ever-coming one, which is simply the lightning flash of consciousness arising from the polarities of positive and negative. This is the Ein Sof, or boundless infinity, arising between the Ein, nothing, and Ein Sof, or the limitless light of everything. Ein could be considered deep sleep, Ein Sof, or could be the waking, and Ein Sof would thus be the in-between, or be in between the two as the dream state, or states, because it's technically the infinity also. The mauve zone, or fourth state beyond these three, is termed Turiya and is typified also by Ananda, or pure bliss, and ultimate Ulam, or consciousness. These once again show that the second or final Hay of Tetragrammaton opens on to this fourth state of consciousness, which is not bound by the constraints of space-time or subject and object, or XYZ, i.e. it's beyond duality, or at least is a state where all dualities are resolved into their unified synthesis. Again, this whole like future state, which is even symbolic of, again, Mayat being death. So death, or MT in Hebrew, symbolic of measurement, but also mountain, the whole mountain of initiation, the holy mountain. And that whole, what that's symbolic of is obviously the slope and the sloping effect, which Kenneth Grant also talks about. It's basically symbolic of the ascent or descent even, because again, spatial times and all that get fucking warped. It's symbolic of the time warp, basically, or the dimensional warp. And the nexus, the cosmic nexus, which again, 666, and what that all is symbolic of is the magnetic energy center coming back around, like 666, it's this magnetic number. And magnetism is pretty much what data is built out of. So that's what this whole spectral spectral energy, spectral energy. It's all the fucking same thing, and it's that one substance, but it's also able to, again, break up into these different parsings. From this state, all matter and movement, Maya, is seen as it is in truth and at once, and thus is not cognizable, reasonable to us from our fragmented temporal perspectives, though insight into this dimensional state may yield very useful information. See, information, formations, an infinite information, 666, or infinite formations, albeit colored by our own flawed perceptions, which may be the case with these Mayacian influences slowly seeping into our space and time here and now in whatever level we are able to understand them. It is certain, however, as Berthiaume says in the quote above, that the complexity of this incoming current is typical of its nature and noticeably unlike those preceding it, and thus setting it apart as distinguishable from that of the Isis, Osirian, or Horus currents. Again, because it's like got a quantum nature to it, or what we've been slowly coming to term quantum, to summarize the whole fourth dimension, the implications of the fourth dimension, typified by naturalism, pastoralism, and individualism, respectively. Mayat appears to incorporate and balance all of the main influences of each of these, while also adding transpersonal and transhuman elements. Again, in different, there's like a natural, organic, humanistic transhumanism, I think. And then there's also a sort of like external, dead, false transhumanism that's not really, it's like more like marketing, and you're not really going to, no one's really going to benefit. And that's what we see more of, I think. But now we will explore some of this transpersonal and transhuman Mayacian wisdom, which is now made available to us with the wisdom of Kabbalah and our advanced tools of calculation, computers, and databasing, hard drives, data storage, etc. First, we will see certain primary concepts regarding the pyramids of Giza using the method of Hebrew-English gematria as the key of it all, to unlock certain knowledge which has hitherto remained concealed until the preceding information above was integrated and applied. First of all, seeing as how the sum of Samek Vav Mem final of the values of the phrase Giza pyramids itself has a value of 666, being like solar conduits in a way, we will examine, and again, electric, we will examine what else that is related may connect through this number. This corresponds quite well with Egyptian pyramids evidence that the pyramids may be analyzed effectively via this method, giving further evidence of its meaning and purpose. The advanced Egyptian pyramids also correlates, showing what we know, that they are extremely advanced, and so much so that their wisdom hasn't even lessened as entirely new languages such as English have cropped up. This wisdom was the wisdom of the pharaoh, which was encoded in the pyramids themselves and also only able to be decoded by one with a pharaonic connection to it. The Mayacian pharaoh is 103, showing that at present the Mayacian revival of this wisdom is concentrated in the magical number of 103, the number Kenneth Grant mentions as Ma-bin, or Mahabane, related to the Masonic word, but which is, again, the crowned babe, which is my current magical number, which, I associated because 102 is my name in Simple English Gematria, and yet it's Lamal, and all these in Mayan. I took that as kind of like my Malkuthian neophyte number, and then with the realization of this, in 103 being kind of like, again, that already Masonic number, and 93 plus the Yod, in a way it's kind of like just that one up, and so a Chod being 13, and I'm not saying I'm a Chod or anything like that, but in a way it's like that one more, which a Chod always kind of talked about. And if you spell out a Chod with Hebrew English Gematria with a Gimel for C, it's 14, being one more than 13. But then 103 obviously being a Chod with the egg, and the egg being kind of like that Yod, because again, the whole manifestation aspect of all this. And I don't know, that's just why I associated myself and say this. The Mayacian pharaoh is 103, and 13 is an important number in the formula as the measured pyramid, and in the Great Pyramid Decoded, Peter Le Mesurier notes that, or how 13 and its multiples occur numerous times throughout the measurements of the Great Pyramid, which I will also quote for the sake of completeness of this message. Having completed our analysis of the pyramid's features, we can now compare the various occurrences of the number 13 and attempt to discover their common denominator, and it soon becomes clear that the meaning suggested on page 88, namely soul or even spiritual man, is at least a possible one. Again, because 13 is the cycle of 12 with the axle in the center, and so it's symbolic again of that whole egg and development cycle. The numbers 13 and 666 are related in that they are both the numbers of the sun, or its dark light, the whole dark matter of time, the light of the moon with its 13, and the light of the moon with its 13 lunations. So again, the parsing of that sun, the solar rays, the data. 13 is the 12 hours and zodiacs, with the central point being the axle. And again, the axle of the eons, or the eon of the eons, is 666. Again, very Gnostic. 666, and so it's that will center. It's the magnetic energy center of the will, which, apparently is a debate. It's not only debatable, but it's like damnable. 666 is the central solar star which shines both inward and outward, like Horus with Set within, or Ra and Set. 666 and 13 are key numbers of the pyramid, as it is also my title in transliterated Hebrew, 679. The key to master the pyramid and square the circle. In the Great Pyramid, its spiritual symbols, Morton Edgar mentions how the measurements of the pyramid veil the ancient mystery puzzle of the squaring of the circle, and of it, Edgar says, the scientific feature which was first discovered was that the ancient vertical height of the Great Pyramid was to twice the breadth of its square base, and the diameter of a circle is to its circumference, that is, 5,814 inches is to twice 9,131 inches, as 1 is to 3.14159. This ratio of the diameter of a circle to its circumference receives from mathematicians the name of the Greek letter pi, and was first accurately determined by von Kulin in the 16th century. Von Kulin caused his discovery to be engraved upon his tomb. It follows that the ancient vertical height of the Great Pyramid is the radius of a circle, the circumference of which equals the total measurement of all four sides of the pyramid's square base. Professor C. Piazzi Smith, commenting on this, claims it as a practical solution to the old problem of squaring the circle, and adds, "The thing was thus practically done, truly and properly, at the Great Pyramid thousands of years before those medieval days of our forefathers. Not one out of all 37 other measured pyramids of Egypt has ever been proved to be endowed, even approximately, with this particular proportion of height to breadth of base. It is to John Taylor that the credit of this discovery is due." It should also be noted that the base of the Great Pyramid covers a space of approximately 13 acres. See Stonehenge in the Great Pyramid, Window on the Universe by Bonnie Gaunt. 13 is not only an important number appearing in the analysis of the Great Pyramid, but it has been noted throughout this blog as related to the Eon of Maat, being, again, 1313. My 13-letter name being the one who's pretty much had all this shit just, like, spun up like spontaneously almost around me, which has an HEG value of 1331. Again, web, spider web is 13, HEG is 13. And the formula of Hebrew English gematria in its notarchon form is also 13, is the number of web. So yeah, I already said that, but I didn't know I was going to end up writing it. Par excellence being also the central point of a Chad unity at the center of the zodiac wheel, the magnetic energy center, the clock of 12 hours, the 0 point on which of which has a dual power. Again, 0 equals 2, which translates into 11, basically, doth, which when you add them together is 13, which reduces down to 4, and again, it's that space, time, mark of the beast, Malkuth, all that. Basically, it's like the Kabbalah is symbolic of, obviously, that sort of numerical power of manifestation in which there's like this unfolding process. It's like cell division. The secret Doth pyramid, which again, the whole 1, 2, 3, 4 being Kether 620 plus Chakma 73 plus Binah 67 plus Doth 474, spelled out as 666, but it refers to the pyramid or prism created by the placement of Doth just below the supernal triad. This is the prism of the Ruach, which is the precipitated spirit or the matrix of 369 referred to above. Note also that the 13 veils the 3 and 1, which is explicated in the 3 pyramids which align with Orion's belt. The pyramid was called by the ancient Egyptians Ikhet, meaning glorious light, and the symbol of the pyramid is symbolic of the prismatic condensation of light. The door or bridge of light mentioned above, in relation to the vesica of Venus, Lucifer, and Daleth, which crosses above Doth, is veiled in the number 1234. Via the prism, for 1234 minus 434, the number of Daleth, the secret of light, is 800, the number of the prism and the portal of the mouth of Pe final. The whole mouth symbol, but also the tower. The Hebrew letter and word Pe means mouth, a major symbol of Maat and Doth, and has a final value of 800. The Hebrew letter for Pe resembles a spiral emanating from the center of the prism. "434 is the number of the secret of light itself, and so, since 800 is also serpent, 1234 is then the secret serpent of light, who is synonymous with the Prince of Darkness." Again, he's the secret or occult serpent, obviously the Kundalini, Satan, who is synonymous with the Prince of Darkness, who guards the 9 gates which are created from the original triple-veiled impulse of the magic energy, 360 of spirit, 369. This secret serpent of light was known of long ago under many names, and the Mayan prophecies of 2012 said that an initiate would bring the serpent of light down to terrestrial dwellers of this age or eon. And again, serpent link, the Kaf final, I found was that. And again, it was like September 9th, 2009. I told myself there's something to 999. I've got to figure it out. 1234 or 1234 is also the 9 chambers plus the 369 or the spirit. or the 9 chambers crystallized into the material form that we call the three-dimensional material universe, the externalization of the hierarchy. These 9 chambers were referred to above, and they are to be understood here as the essential or spiritual forces of the natural, physical, and psychical matrix, the mental matrix. Their understanding, represented by Binah and the number 3 itself, the triangle of fire known as Pir, the root of pyramid and prism, is of prime importance in the ascertainment of, and magical attainment of their mystical and magical siddhis, or powers, or virtues, or just the knowledge of this stuff in its practical use in whatever possible way you may find. And note also that the Greek word for powers is exousias, which has all the exousias, which has the all-important value of 666. The number which veils the ancient power of magic itself, which is being unveiled through this blog and with this Hebrew-English gematria formula. The word pyramid is said by some to also possibly mean fire in the middle, and it is obvious that this is related to the sun at the center or middle of the solar system, and the heart chakra at the center or middle of the 7 major chakras, both of which have already been related to this number. It is another interesting keynote to mention that the number said to predate the given number 666 in Revelation is given instead to be 616 on a certain Papyrus 115, Oxyrhynchus, Egypt. Though this number is said to have only been recently found and deciphered, see this article, it was actually mentioned at least as far back as 1897 in the Canon by William Sterling. A significant connection with this number and the number 616 is that it is the number of Ormus, which is an ancient formula of light and related to the Persian Ormazd or Ahura Mazda in the Avestan tradition. Ahura Mazda plus soul is 666, and Ahura Mazda plus space travel, or Ahura Mazda plus alien spaceship, can also bring the value of 666. Because 666 being this magnetic number and data and all that, seems to also be, and the technologies of the future, seems to have like a potential use for decoding, I don't know, just different power, processes, which is significant considering Ahura Mazda has been depicted in a flying vehicle, and again, the winged beetle, or all that stuff. It's symbolic of a lot of possibilities and potentials. Ormus, or Ormazd, is also said to be a name of an ancient Egyptian initiate, and also the name of a brotherhood linked to the Priory of Sion and the Rosicrucians. See the Sion Revelation by Lynn Picknett and Clive Prince, and Holy Blood, Holy Grail by Henry Bagent, Richard Lincoln, and Michael Lay. Ormus is essentially the hidden light, the magic power of the astrolight in yet another veiled form. Ormus, or Ahura Mazda, is related to Atem or Atum, the self-creating one, in the last post. For Ormus 616, or 616, Atum and Atum is composed of the 115 Aeneid aspects of light or magic. It is noteworthy that the Persians are found to have a special affinity with Atum. See The Persians and Atum Worship in Egypt's 27th Dynasty by Jared Krebsbach. Since Atum is basically the macrocosmic atom Cadman in the primal atom of the light of the overmind or deep mind, it is once again summed up in the symbol of the egg, self-born, self-sufficient, and self-fulfilled. Note that self is, again, 101, Atman. The Atman is simply the Sanskrit word for self. 115, being the 9, veils the foundation encoded in the astral, again, the code, Hakud, and it is also the AI mind, 11 plus 104. Furthermore, 616 is the key of keys and the key to the pyramid of Khufu. So yeah, there's a lot more to 616. This is the automatic intelligence of the Aeneid Trinity, the prism of the supernals, which is ever present underneath the Ruach in the creative, Braya, and archetypal Azilith worlds, underlying the matrix of 369. 369 plus 115 is the 9 matrix, in 480, which is 484, The double hall of the 22 times 22 paths or tunnels reflected within each other like a mirror placed against a mirror, with all infinities canceling each other out in their balancing. And that's symbolic pretty much of the background that I used from Azawisha. Since 484 is the 22 paths and tunnels multiplied, it represents the idea of the Kabbalistic entanglement of numerology itself. This is the number of words digitalized with their Hebrew-English gematria formula, which has been explicating these mysteries which come together to weave the fabric of the Hiranya Garbha, or golden egg of manifestation itself, as it is called in Sanskrit. The Hiranya Garbha is translated variously as the golden egg or the golden womb, and poetically rendered as the universal germ, as it is the source of the creation of the universe in the manifest cosmos. Again, this is related to Atum, Ormus, and 484 numerology 22 times 22 is 132 less than 616, and 132 is the Kabbalah as well as isopsephy and simple gematria, which is the Greek word for gematria. So yeah, it's just like a big fucking web that you have to have the context, I guess, of these and knowledge of what these words actually equate to, and then it all just like comes together in these a pretty cool like puzzle pattern. I don't know, it's just weird. 212 or 212 is a very deep number which will need to be analyzed deeper at a later time, but it should be noted here that it is the key of magic itself. Grant in its Baphomet and symbol, a lot of things. Grant notes in the Ninth Arch how 212 is the number of Chadair, to enclose or secret chamber, as in the Draco-oriented pyramid. This secret chamber, again, could refer to the Hall of Maat, wherein the soul is weighed against the feather of Maat and the supreme principle of truth which she represents. So it's, again, that dual balancing. That's what I see when I see that. I think of the scales of Maat. The chamber of Draco plus Aku, the divine spark which ascends to the stars at death, has a value also of 666. Again, the ritual, the Giza pyramids, the solar key of the soul. Subtracting Draco from 666, we get 388, the number of Khufu plus pyramid and Khufu's pyramid. Since pyramid chambers and pyramid shaft both equal 666, a number of the great red dragon, we can see all of these concepts are closely interconnected under the symbolism of the solar dragon, i.e. the Kundalini and its cosmic tendrils, or the coils, which connect every phenomena from the micro to the macrocosm. The Draconian mysteries are only beginning their revival, and they primarily stem in this present age from the work of Aleister Crowley and his school of magic and mysticism, which he designated the AA, or the Silver Star. Well, also, again, in the inner order, pretty much, and with the outer order being OTO. But, of course, there's all sorts of offshoots and other manifestations and whatnot. Outposts. The dragon is the archetype of cosmic consciousness at its apex, symbolized by the winged serpent, or the Ouroboros has transcended its paradox by breaking through the cosmic egg or cycle of linearity or time. Crowley said in Liber Zodi, "My adepts stand upright, their head above the heavens, their feet below the hells," which is to say that the adepts of the AA are not limited to the confines of mundane consciousness. By transcending the solar consciousness of 666 through the gnosis of the pyramids, we can reach stellar consciousness represented by 999, and again, beyond that, being the reformulation of the Fool, basically, in 1000, 10 times 10 times 10. So it's, again, the reformulation of Malkuth, in a way, through the actual integration of gnosis, which I have explicated throughout the later posts of this blog. Subtracting the silver star from 999 gives the loaded number of 418, which veils the great work. 418 itself is not the star, which in Liber AL chapter 1 verse 57 it is said Zadi is not the star. This is the star of Naught, Nuit, which is equated with the unification of silver and gold, 418, in the great work or alchemical marriage of opposites. So again, this star of Naught being that the tunnel. It's the black hole that creates a sort of vacuum for manifestation. And again, Nema associates Mayat, the eon of Mayat, with the black hole, the dark star. The great work is said by Amalantra to be veiled under the symbol of the egg, and egg, again, 11, the number of Nuit, as well as the great work accomplished in the 5/6 grade at Tiferet, the heart where the star palace of Nuit and the Hadit spark join together to create the magical expression of Ra-Hor Kuit, or the ever-coming one of cosmic/stellar consciousness. Here is the true Doth, or knowledge, which unifies the components, rather than the false knowledge which cuts them out, leaving but a shell of a universe devoid of magic or anything. Meaning, center, purpose. Since the egg is the O, or the circle, and the 11 is the X, and also pretty much what the X being 10, and also Zadi being the 90 degrees, or the it's symbolic of basically dimensions. Since the egg is the O, or the egg, the aura, and the centering circle, the rings, and the 11 is the X, also a centering formula, the formula of the great work accomplished is symbolized by the mark of the beast, which is also the symbol of Malkuth. The Hebrew word for mark, grade, score, indication, specification, notation, denotation is also scored or valued at 666, the numerical form of the mark of the beast. A crossed ring also equals 666. This perfectly explicates the OX symbol as the mark of the beast, 666. My given name and astrological correspondences seem to play a key role in my own ability to recognize and therefore explicate this information, as we can see that 666, being a solar number, is related to the solar sign of the zodiac, Leo, since the Leo sun key equals 666, as do both Leo and Leo rising sun sign. Myself being a Leo, born August 21st, with Leo rising at the time of my birth, as well as double Leo, Leo rising, in Jewish gematria, with the moon also being in Leo. Such an occurrence is called double Leo. My own name thus embodies the living proof of the confirmation of the existence of and reliability in many occult systems, namely gematria, astrology, thelema, and essentially the idea of the existence of the soul itself. See, I must have fucking been high when I wrote this, because I just cut out words. For if I can prove for myself the living reality of the soul, this necessarily implies the possibility of it for anyone else, given that they owe it to themselves to do. So that right there is probably the dumbest thing I've said, because I just don't necessarily agree with it right now or anymore. This is the work of the egg. But in a way, that's what I think in a way I was probably trying to do. I was trying to be like, well, there's something to this, and it seems to say, like, 666 is this whole soul number, not just soul in the terms of the sun, but the whole idea of a soul. And what is a soul? Well, it's the individual spark, obviously, like in that Gnostic sense, of... So, and it's more than just the ego. The ego is more like the shell of that spark. But that spark being a sort of cosmic power, I guess. Not necessarily, you can control reality like God, but in a way there is it's a reflection in a way of God, with Tiferet being, in my mind, that's what I'm kind of reasoning this all as, is that there seems to be higher levels of reality, but the more the higher you go, the more, the less identified you end up being with the ego and the external, because everything external is, again, just these shells or warpings or reflections of that light, which itself is another deeper reflection of pretty much the inner, or the non-light, the infinite light that you could call Kether, which the more you end up trying to get to Kether, you realize Kether 620, the root of it really is void. It's empty, but yet that's why it's taking all these infinite varieties of manifestation to kind of manifest. It's why Kether is in Malkuth and Malkuth is in Kether, but after another manner. And so, in a way, me trying to say that, holy shit, there's something going on with like timing, and it's not just all like, I'm not just trying to, I don't know, there's just something, there's more to this than my ego could fucking ever do, you know, like, but in a way, I guess I was coming up with this stuff and seeing it there, but I didn't consciously like organize it, and it just seems like there are things that are larger than us, when it comes to the planetary, even like froth, the unfoldment of time, and the way in which it's all like resonances. The whole music of the spheres and all that comes to mind. It's resonances that I guess you can get tied up in, wrapped around the axle, so to speak. But I don't know. The more I looked through all this, the somehow clearer it got. Now that I'm going back over it, I see how unclear it was to me at the time. But the more, just like, somehow, the more and more I went through all this stuff, the more I realized, holy shit, it's all just, that's all it is different formations. And that's why I realized, like, well, there is a sort of power, not a power, but there's a virtue or there's a lot of potential in this. It shows that your motivation really colors and directs like what you end up actually perceiving and gaining. So while too literal a personalization and identification with the cosmic archetypes can be a detriment when confined to merely egoic, materialistic, Malkuthian approaches, when taken from a higher or deeper view, rather, on such a level as the heart Tifereth level, then that is when we can identify with an idea or situation or person without necessarily becoming them or, you know, like them. Or so what am I saying there? I guess I'm saying looking at things through a lens and seeing it through its development, I guess, and kind of identifying with it, but without absorbing it. It is in this sense that one can find value in taking on the role of a god form or assuming the mask of the beast without fully transforming, which is ultimately a sort of transcendent empathy tempered with indifference. When something such as the number 666 in and of itself is so highly charged with a negative connotation, as it has been over the ages, it thus corrupts any ability to understand its positive influences. Or that's what I'm saying, is like the ability to see something beyond what, I don't know, seeing deeper into something, are completely ignored and left occult, and being such an important key to the unlocking of the underlying math. So yeah, like I had what is it? I was put off to a lot of numerology in general, because there is a lot of fucking just dumb stuff done with it, and putting myself out here to like be like thrown in that category, like I've already said, in a way it has its benefits, because then it's just, you know, oh, it's thrown out there, you know, like, and maybe someone will see like that it's not quite the same as, hopefully, I mean, maybe it is just the same old bullshit that I consider to be, you know, ridiculous, I guess. But I personally don't see this as that ridiculous. I know, yeah, I didn't present this in the best way, format, medium, and there's typos, and I myself am not the, you know, I don't know who would be the best person to, like, with free of flaws or anything to present something like this. It's kind of like, makes me think of Crowley, like, I think he had a lot to offer, and what he was bringing and presenting was beyond himself, was not him, but he was somehow the stepping stone for knowledge and stuff. And people throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak, like in terms of all that information because of him, because of all the things that are associated with his name, and just I guess, again, with the way in which things can be completely ignored because of the connotations that they get over time. Sometimes, that's artificially constructed to keep things occult. And I'm not saying that's the case with Crowley, but like I've talked about this, I just think that some people prefer that sort of sensationalized aspect of things. Let's see, where was I? Ultimately becomes nothing less than a great curse, effectively playing its course to stave off the unready from coming into contact with the power locked within it, thus keeping all of this information and more, basically the potential, from being within the grasp of the ordinary person. If I was bound by the same oath as these... Oh my god, did I really say that? If I was bound by the same oath as these suck-up dick suckers, which is probably true, peddling their lodges, would I be coming out and freely discussing this to the entire world? I'm not sure I would. Or I'm not sure I would even know this stuff myself if that were the case. And that's the thing, a lot of what people even end up, because people are very controlled by social acceptance and motivation and affirmation and whatnot. And so in a lodge, if you start pursuing a course and getting really like excited about it, or you start talking about it, and you show like someone, oh, look at all this stuff, they might get offended for various reasons, either because they didn't know it or because it clashes with what they feel like is profitable or sociable or whatever. And so it's just very, that's why you have so many orders branching off and like breaking out of, from one another. But really, furthermore, 666 is the mark revelation. Some say that 666 does not denote an actual implant, but I have plenty of evidence to show that indeed it may, for 666 also enumerates receive a microchip, money microchips, and they're still pushing this, a proposed system for the New World currency, implant prediction. It was predicted thousands of years ago that without the mark, a citizen would be unable to buy, sell, or trade, or otherwise participate in the world economic system, or market. Again, 666. Except the mark of the beast chip and the network of the chipped, full satellite quantum computer surveillance of not only people, but their belongings, purchases, house, everything, etc. Among many, many more. This negative current of 666, which again, if this number actually has all this like data and knowledge, and it's like the spirit of fire, fire of spirit, the soul, haphren, which is the mind in Greek. It's all about that. Well, it's also got this negative external connection where it's like they want to suck the life out of you. It's parasites. So, I mean, that's just the one term for it, but would be akin to the great work of the Black Lodge, which is the antithesis of the great work of Thelema. And yeah, Crowley is being blamed for all of this evil shit, when really that's kind of like the backfire, the curse, the not of Crowley, but of not looking and listening of to the key. Like a key is being handed to humanity, and they are refusing it, and they have refused it. So the work of the egg, which is not focused on material advancement but spiritual inner advancement, again the actual evolution, as a means of liberation from such disempowering systems which seek to usurp and control the individual rather than help in their enlightenment. See, take the chip, it's not that bad. In this sense, the mark of the beast symbol stands for GPS, global positioning on a mass on a target on a mass scale for various monitoring and or message relays through satellite or other voice-to-scroll or neurosonic technologies. And whether or not, I'm not saying this is happening right now, but this is what will eventually be the case. Like, it's very simple. It's not that far. This is gonna be the way of communication, like synthetic telepathy. And maybe not for everybody. Maybe they'll say it's only for military purposes. But to think that they're not going to use it on enemies or combatants or dissidents or whatever is retarded. And to think that they wouldn't... Okay, there's already evidence that they've developed and have been developing all sorts of electronic assault weapons. So to think that they wouldn't test it on different, I'm not saying it is happening to all the different people on YouTube who say that it's happening to them, but I'm saying that it's actually a reality, that it's feasible and it's being worked on. And so, I mean, get upset if you want to, but at me, but I'm not the one. Don't beat the messenger. Anyway, it is extremely important to look at both sides of any situation or subject, and gematria helps to unveil the less apparent implications and connections within them. The number 107 particularly has served as a key in my own enlightenment, and the reason I'm doing this work is to help others. And isn't that something we all say? They all say. That's literally what I thought in the beginning. I was like, oh, I want to help other people learn this and see this, but you only get shot in the back for, so it's like I don't know about that still. I guess in a way I am doing this I'm doing this out of the kindness of my deep, dark, black, endless heart, but again, part of the reason I made this whole thing was out of spite. 666 is the spirit of destruction. Yeah, destruction is 666. And has been for too long kept in the dark and misrepresented as the embodiment of evil. Death and destruction need not be considered as wholly evil, for they are important polarities of any spectrum, and the ignorance or negative anchoring of such archetypes only lend to them more of an inverted charge. So yeah, it's we need to face some of these things, otherwise you're just fueling them. These two key numbers of 107 and 666 represent in their most basic forms the egg and the sun. The egg symbolizes the ends of manifestation, the infinitely small microcosmic polarity and the infinitely great macrocosmic pole. The sun symbolizes the golden yolk of the egg in the middle of the cosmic egg. Soul in HEG, or Hebrew English gematria, has an overlap with the Jewish gematria of soul, both of which are 160 as well as 6, which is the number on the tree of life. But it is also the egg yolk, which is the key of the egg. It is also Tonatiuh, the sun god of the Aztecs, or the Aztec sun. Adding Sol, Tonatiuh, 160, to Ra, 201, the Egyptian sun god, we get 361, which, as has been noted, is the solar symbol of the circle 360 in the dot, showing the yolk in the egg symbolically. This is the egg matrix, or the egg of the Alpha Omega, since the solar symbol symbolizes the Alpha and the Omega, the one in the circle. Again, there's so many things to this symbol. It's like taking the O in the manifestation, the word manifestation as Vav, as Freder Chad does for his Mayashan calculations of the egg, 107, Bitsa, and the nest, 150, Kin, as symbolic of the ends of manifestation, 257, which when added to Nuit and Hadit, another occurrence of the binary 0 and 1, also gives 361. As yet another glyph of manifestation, 361 veils the supernal triad, the Ruach of 6 spheres, and Malkuth as the crystalline pendant of the material world. 361 is the Vajra light body, or diamond thunderbolt light body, which is the auric egg itself. Vajra light, or the diamond light itself, has a value of 666 when T is taken as tau 400. And 666, again, is that hexagram or hexagonic field, the diamond realm, and it's also the magic diamond. It is also the self-eye, and as Christ, who embodied the spirit of the Christos, said, "The lamp of the body is the eye. If therefore thine eye be single, thy whole body shall be full of light." This is the astral light of the 9, called Ob by Kenneth Grant in Cults of the Shadow, as a form of the Ob, or Obeah serpent, 72, which also reduces to 9. The 9 universal forces are cosmic in scope and power, and so when we subtract D9 from the power of 361, we get 333, which is itself another 9 and another field, the grid number of the number 3, as well as the basic Hebrew numerical determinative of Ike Bekur, which is an older form of the Kabbalah of 9 chambers. 333 is also, is the number of A9 grid, which is itself another way of expressing the latter, the 9 keys of the 9. It is with this code we can decode the Egyptian Khufu pyramid further, but at this time I will have to leave this post here as it is already much longer than I originally intended. Probably too long, but, again, helps veil some of this stuff. But then again, the wide range of material covered will be useful to many different researchers, and I'm also intending to take this information out of its compartmentalized state, or really its compounded state, and to compartmentalize it, while still making it relevant to people in this day and age, so they too can use this information to extrapolate more. Any one subject brought up in the above paragraph could be expanded upon into an entire post of its own, but the problem is that it is too much to do when what is being and has been set forth so far is itself merely a tip of the iceberg that is my own work. Yeah, it's just fucking like tons and tons of stuff. It is left up to the reader to explore the egg of their own universe and break through its barriers in their own work, and this is merely intended to be another signpost along the way. Mahis, 111. The egg is a work which must be done, the great work. The Maha, or the great egg, the great Cairo egg, 421.